The world is filled with mysteries that elude explanation. Some are ancient, others modern. They are connected to archaeology, space, vanished civilizations, unexplained phenomena, and anomalous events that continue to puzzle researchers. Today, we'll delve into 6 dozen real-life mysteries, each of which remains unsolved. Vinland Map? The Vinland Map is one of the most controversial artifacts related to the study of ancient voyages. In addition to lands known in the Middle Ages, it depicts a landmass to the west that is strikingly reminiscent of the northeastern coast of America. If the map is authentic, it proves that Europeans knew of the existence of new lands long before the great voyages of modern times. However, the question of its authenticity has remained open for many decades. The map was discovered in the mid-20th century and immediately sparked a wave of interest. It shows a large island to the west, labeled Grape Country. This matches the accounts of northern explorers who described a green land rich in berries and forests. These accounts were long dismissed as legends, but archaeological finds have shown that northern peoples actually lived in what is now Canada. The most astonishing thing about the map is that it looks like the work of a medieval scribe. The lines are hand-drawn, and the text is formatted in the style of ancient manuscripts. At first glance, everything seems quite ordinary, but the presence of the outlines of the western lands makes it special. At the time, it was believed that Europeans could not have known about the existence of new continents. Once the map became widely known, extensive research began. Scholars examined the ink, the parchment, the writing style, and the letter forms. Initial studies suggested that the parchment was indeed ancient, bolstering the idea that the map might be authentic. However, doubts later arose. Some experts noted that the ink's composition raised questions. Substances typically associated with later periods were found in it. This sparked the first wave of controversy. Some scholars believed the map was a forgery created by a talented artist. Others argued that the substances found could have been caused by aging or environmental influences. Ultimately, the question of the ink remained unresolved. Another point of debate is the map's content. The depiction of the western lands matches later ideas about Vinland. But how accurate is the map? Looking at the outlines, they resemble real geography only in general terms. This may indicate that the map is based on travelers' accounts rather than precise observations. There are also those who believe the map was created as a teaching aid. Medieval monks may have recorded knowledge gained from various sources. If someone told them of a distant land, they might attempt to map it without having precise information. In this case, the map isn't scientific, but reflects the actual memory of travel. Some researchers note that the map contains details not found in other documents of the time. This makes it unique, but also raises doubts. Overly unusual maps often turn out to be forgeries, created to attract attention or make money. However, in this case, the authorship is unknown, and the motive is difficult to determine. Despite all the controversy, the map has become a symbol of the idea that history can be much more complex than we think. If the map is authentic, it means that knowledge of the lands to the west truly existed and could have been transmitted secretly or within a close circle. This changes our understanding of how geographical information was disseminated. It's believed the map was created later, but based on ancient knowledge. Perhaps someone was attempting to reconstruct lost information, relying on stories and ancient texts. In that case, the map wouldn't be a forgery, but it wouldn't be direct evidence of ancient discoveries. It would be a reflection of forgotten knowledge, reassembled. What's also interesting is that the map creates an air of mystery. It seems to connect the world of legend and the world of science. We know that northern explorers did indeed reach new lands. We know that stories about Vinland existed. But whether this was known to the wider European community remains an open question. Modern researchers continue to analyze the map. Subtle methods of material analysis are used and new data emerges each time. But the result is often the same. Complete certainty as to its authenticity or forgery remains elusive. This makes the map a living mystery, a space for discussion, debate, and contemplation. The Vinland map reminds us that history doesn't always provide direct and clear answers. Sometimes intermediaries, hints, and traces remain between us and the past, requiring attention, patience, and caution. Until definitive proof is found, the map will continue to capture the imagination, raising the question, is it possible that someone knew of new lands much earlier than we're accustomed to thinking? Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is one of the most famous and, at the same time, most mysterious relics in the world. It's a long sheet of light-colored linen on which a faint image of a human body is visible. The image seems burned into the fabric. It's not bright, not clear, but so expressive that it leaves no one indifferent. For centuries, people have wondered, what is this image and how did it come into being? The main mystery of the shroud is the image itself. Looking at the cloth closely, only subtle spots and lines are visible. But when you step back or look at it from a certain angle, the silhouette of a man appears. Facial features, hands, a chest, and marks on the skin are visible. It seems as if it were the imprint of a body covered in wounds. This is precisely what makes the shroud a relic. Many believe it could have been the burial cloth of an ancient man who endured severe trials. From a scientific perspective, the image is striking in its uniqueness. It doesn't resemble a drawing. There are no traces of dye, no brushstrokes, or layers. The fabric appears to be slightly altered on the surface, and the pattern emerges through subtle changes in the fibers. This creates the impression that the image was created without the artist's hand. This effect is difficult to reproduce even today. There's a theory that the image could have been created by chemical reactions. If the body had come into contact with the fabric, stains could have formed. But then the image would have been blurry. The shroud, however, reveals a strange feature. The image isn't fully imprinted, but only on the top layer of linen threads. This seems almost impossible. Physical contact usually leaves deeper marks. One theory is that the image was created by intense heat, as if the fabric had been briefly exposed to heat. But how could heat of such intensity have been generated to reveal the image without burning the fabric remains a mystery. Others suggest the influence of light, but this also seems unlikely for ancient times. The shroud also bears marks resembling wounds. They are located on the forehead, arms, legs, and side. These areas of the fabric are darker in color. Some researchers believe these are traces of blood. However, analysis of these areas is controversial because the fabric has been subjected to numerous conditions: storage, transportation, fire, and repair. One of the most debated issues remains the shroud's age. Various studies have yielded varying results. Some say the fabric is relatively young, while others claim it could be significantly older. But it's important to understand, the fabric has been damaged, repaired, and exposed to fire. All of this influences the test results. Some researchers believe the shroud may have been an ancient relic carefully preserved and passed down. Others suggest it may have been created later, not as a forgery, but as an image created by chance, or as the result of a special ritual. There's also a spiritual perspective. For many, the shroud is a sacred relic. They believe the cloth bears the image of a person who endured suffering and then vanished, leaving only a faint trace. For them, the shroud is not a scientific object, but a symbol of hope. But to fully understand the mystery, it's important to look at the artifact without bias. The fabric is unique in its properties. Its composition matches that of ancient fabrics. The image arose in an unusual way. Traces of damage indicate that the shroud has endured a long journey. It has been stored, transported, burned, and rescued. All of this creates a sense of antiquity. What's also interesting is that the shroud evokes varied reactions. Some see it as proof of a great secret. Others consider it an unusual historical object. But no one ignores it. The artifact makes one think. The Shroud of Turin remains one of those mysteries where science and faith coexist, not mutually exclusive. Science seeks to explain the image's properties, while faith searches for meaning. And until a definitive answer is found, the shroud continues to hold its mystery. It lies quietly, a witness to the past, a reminder that some mysteries defy definitive explanation. And it is precisely for this reason that the Shroud of Turin remains one of the world's most profound and moving mysteries. A riddle to which people return again and again, trying to decipher the story imprinted on the fine linen. Sabu disc. The Sabu disc is one of the most unusual artifacts found in ancient Egypt. It was discovered in the tomb of a high-ranking individual who lived during the rise of Egyptian civilization. At first glance, the disc appears to be a strangely shaped stone bowl, but upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that it is more than just a vessel. Its shape is so unusual that it still raises questions about its purpose and manufacturing methods. The disc is made of a stone that is not known for its softness. It requires careful handling, and working it in ancient times must have been a real challenge. The disc's shape resembles a flat plate, but 3 identical petals are located along the edges, like wings or curved blades. In the center, there is a small, rounded section that protrudes forward and is separated from the outer petals by a thin strip of material. The most striking thing about the disc is its symmetry. All 3 petals are evenly spaced, as if the artifact were created using a perfect blueprint. The petals are slightly curved and appear to be designed to rotate or direct the flow of air or liquid. This has led to numerous speculations that the disc may have been part of some kind of mechanism. However, difficulties arise when attempting to find a logical explanation. The Egyptians did not use complex rotating mechanisms. Their technology relied on human and animal power, as well as simple devices. But if the disc was indeed part of a device, then what kind? This question remains unanswered. Some researchers believe the disc may have been a ritual element. Ancient Egypt boasted numerous symbols and objects whose shapes held magical or cultic significance. Perhaps the petals symbolized the parts of the world, and the central protrusion represented the solar disk. At that time, the artifact had no practical purpose, but rather served in rituals related to the afterlife or the worship of the gods. Another theory involves musical instruments. It's speculated that the disc could have been part of a complex instrument or used to generate sound. However, there's no evidence for this, and the disc's shape is too unusual for such a purpose. There are even bolder ideas. Some believe the disc could have served as part of a system for transporting liquids or air. The petals resemble wings or a propeller. But if the disc rotated, additional components would have been needed, none of which have been found. Furthermore, the disc's material would not have been able to withstand the heavy loads. Researchers also note that the disc was located in a tomb. This may indicate its value or significance. Egyptians placed objects in tombs that were believed to be important for the soul's journey to the afterlife. If the artifact was a complex instrument, it's difficult to imagine it being made specifically for burial. It most likely served as a symbol. Some study the disc's design by comparing it to images on temple walls. However, there's no exact resemblance to this object. The Egyptians typically depicted important artifacts, but no similar shape has been found. This makes the disc unique and even more mysterious. Scientists conducted research using modern methods. They created 3D models of the disc, measured the precision of its shape, and analyzed the stone's structure. But no study was able to offer a definitive designation. Each theory has its pros and cons. The very fact that the disc was created in a very early era is also intriguing. Egyptian civilization was just developing its traditions at the time. If the disc was created by a master with a unique vision, why weren't similar objects repeated in subsequent generations? If it was an experiment, why wasn't it developed further? If it was a symbol, why is it so rare? The Sabu disc remains a quiet mystery of ancient Egypt. Its shape seems to hint at a hidden function without revealing it. It evokes the feeling of an object crafted by a master craftsman who understood stone and possessed skills beyond the expectations of his time. Each generation of researchers adds new insights to the debate, but there is no definitive answer. And as we gaze upon this smooth stone disc with its 3 curved petals, it continues to hold its secret. It is a reminder that the ancient world was far more diverse than it seems, and that even one object can upend our understanding of the skill and capabilities of people of the distant past. Animals falling from the sky. Animals falling from the sky are one of the strangest natural mysteries, observed on different continents and in different eras. Fish, frogs, small crustaceans, sometimes even small worms, all have suddenly plummeted to the ground with rain or under clear skies. Such events have been described by travelers, farmers, eyewitnesses from rural settlements, and even government officials. But how is this possible if animals don't fly and have no natural means of gaining altitude? The main characteristic of the phenomenon is its suddenness. The sky can be completely clear with no sign of a thunderstorm. People are going about their daily business and suddenly they hear a slapping sound on the ground. Fish begin to fall, sometimes by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds. They can be alive or half dead, some wriggling as if they had just been pulled out of the river. Everything happens quickly, sometimes within a couple of minutes, then it stops as suddenly as it began. Such cases were reported in Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. Ancient chronicles contain tales of raining frogs. In more recent times, farmers in rural areas reported fish falling on their plots after storms. And in some cities, residents found streets covered in small animals as if someone had dumped them out of an invisible sack overhead. One of the first theories involves strong vortexes. Natural phenomena can act as vacuum tubes. These are powerful upward vortices similar to miniature tornadoes. They can lift water from rivers, lakes, or ponds, carrying small creatures along with it. If such a vortex moves through the air and then loses its strength, everything inside falls down. This explains why animals fall in groups. The vortex gathers them in one place. However, this hypothesis has its difficulties. Firstly, such vortices are rare. Secondly, they are usually accompanied by storms and strong winds. But in some cases, described by eyewitnesses, there were no clouds or wind in the sky. It's difficult to imagine a vortex that moves unnoticed and then disappears. Another theory involves microvortices, small but very powerful air currents that occur during sudden temperature changes. They're not as powerful as a tornado, but they can lift water several dozen meters into the air. If there were fish or frogs in the pond at the time, they could have been caught in the air current. This theory is consistent with the fact that small, lightweight animals are most often the ones that fall. But even here, questions remain. For example, how can a microvortex carry a fish tens of kilometers and then drop it in a dry place? Researchers believe such air currents can move faster than they appear and rise to altitude where the wind carries them over considerable distances. There are also more unusual theories. Some suggest that animals may be caught in powerful vertical air columns created by heating up the ground. Such columns rise high and are capable of carrying light objects. This would explain instances of animals landing on land far from bodies of water. It's also interesting that the fallen animals are usually of the same species. If fish fall, they're all fish. If frogs fall, they're all frogs. This uniformity suggests that the source of their uplift was local. For example, a small pond or a specific section of the river from which a whirlwind swept everything up at once. Sometimes fish not found in local waters were found. This means the air could have carried them long distances. But how far can a small fish travel in a water vortex? Researchers believe the wind can carry such objects tens of kilometers, especially if the current rises high. Some residents perceive such events as a sign or omen. In ancient cultures, heavenly fish could be considered a warning or a blessing. People believed that animals falling from the sky were not accidental. But modern science seeks to explain the phenomenon through physical processes. There are also cases that are almost impossible to explain. Sometimes animals fall without a trace of water. They are dry, as if they never rose from a pond. Or they fall on a sunny day when there are no signs of atmospheric phenomena. Such cases are rare, but they do appear in descriptions. Some scientists suspect that specific local wind currents, which are still poorly understood, may have been at work. Sometimes witnesses note that the animals fall not from above, but as if from the side, at an angle. This further highlights the complexity of air currents. Air doesn't always rise strictly vertically. It can move in a curved trajectory, creating the effect of the animals appearing out of nowhere. What happens to animals after a fall? Most often, they die, but sometimes they remain alive and move for a while. This suggests the fall may not be too violent if the object falls from a small height, or if the current softens the impact. Researchers' interest in this phenomenon remains high. People continue to document such cases, taking photographs, videos, and taking samples. However, there is no clear explanation that covers all situations. The phenomenon may have several causes, and each situation is unique. Animals falling from the sky are a reminder that the Earth's atmosphere is a complex and dynamic system. Air, unseen by us, can transport water, sand, leaves, and even living creatures across vast distances. And while we understand much about the weather, hidden processes remain that continue to surprise. This mystery is one that clearly demonstrates that nature is capable of creating events that seem incredible, almost magical, yet are quite real. And as long as we study the atmosphere, such phenomena will periodically remind us of their unexpectedness and power. Zangus stones. The Zangus stones are one of South America's most unusual mysteries. They are enormous, rounded boulders scattered across a vast area as if someone had deliberately placed them in a specific pattern. Some are almost perfectly spherical, while others are slightly elongated or flattened, but still resemble spheres. When researchers first saw these stones, they couldn't believe that nature could create such precise shapes. The stone's main characteristic is their size. Some are smaller in diameter than a human, but others reach several meters. They appear monumental and strange. Smooth surfaces, precise lines, and massive structures that would be impossible to move by hand. Many of them are located on slopes where no process seems to have brought them to their current position by chance. One theory about the stone's origins revolves around natural formations. In theory, some rocks can form rounded massifs under the influence of time, wind, and precipitation. Weathering processes sometimes create astonishing shapes. However, in the case of the Zangus stones, the problem is that they are too perfectly rounded, their surface too smooth, and their arrangement too deliberate to be explained by chance. Some researchers believe the stones may have been the result of ancient volcanic activity. Giant bubble-like structures could have formed within heated magma, which then solidified and became rounded. If this were the case, the stones would have to be located in areas associated with volcanoes. However, many of them are located far from such zones. There's a theory that the stones could have been the work of ancient craftsmen. This raises many questions. Why did people create such heavy and enormous spheres? How could they have crafted the stone with such precision if they didn't have the metal tools we know today? And how did they move boulders weighing many tons over such long distances? This hypothesis is supported by those who see in the stones traces of ancient cultures that may have possessed lost technologies. Some compare the Zangus stones to the enormous stone spheres of Costa Rica, which were also long considered inexplicable. However, the similarities between them only heighten the confusion, as it suggests that different peoples could have created similar shapes independently. Some stones are arranged in groups, forming lines, arcs, or circles. This raises the question of whether their placement could have had astronomical significance. Perhaps lines ran through these groups, indicating important sunrise and sunset points, as well as the positions of the stars. However, there is no definitive evidence, and many of the stones have been displaced by time or earthquakes. It is believed that the stones may have served as instruments for rituals or ceremonies. Their rounded shape could symbolize celestial bodies, the unity of the world, or the cycle of time. Ancient cultures often saw sacred meaning in the spherical shape, and the stones may have been part of a larger spiritual complex. However, if we consider them as ritual objects, another question arises. Why are there so many stones? Their number is too great for a random ceremony. It seems more like a long process, stretching over generations. If the stones were truly handcrafted, then we are dealing with a vast cultural project, the significance of which remains elusive. Some researchers point to the peculiarities of the material. The stones are composed of hard rocks that are difficult to work. This makes the hypothesis of manual processing difficult. However, if there were special methods of heating or cooling the stones that ancient craftsmen could have used, part of the mystery could be explained. Unfortunately, evidence of such methods has not yet been found. Another interesting detail is that many of the stones have internal cracks that follow spherical lines. This suggests that the shape is natural for these rocks. However, it remains unclear how a natural process could have created hundreds of rounded shapes in a single area. Typically, such processes occur locally, not en masse. There's a hypothesis that the stones could have hatched from the ground gradually. When rocks deep underground are subjected to pressure and heat, they can take on a rounded shape. Then, when the soil erodes, the stones emerge to the surface. But why such processes occurred precisely here and on such a scale is another mystery. Some stones are positioned in such a way that it appears someone placed them in specific locations. This suggests that ancient settlers used the stones to mark territory, create sacred roads, or mark important sites. However, archaeological evidence of human habitation isn't always found nearby, making it difficult to understand. The Zanga stones remain one of those mysteries where nature and man seem to vie for authorship. The stones appear so perfect that one is tempted to believe they are man-made. But they also possess features that suggest a natural origin. Researchers continue to study these boulders using laser scanners, ultrasound, and compositional analysis. Each new detail adds to the puzzle, but the picture remains incomplete. Perhaps we are dealing with a unique geological phenomenon that occurred only in certain places on the planet. Or perhaps we are dealing with the legacy of an ancient culture that left traces in the form of stone spheres, but left no records of its work. The Zanga stones are objects that make one ponder the possibilities of nature and ancient people. They stand on the earth like enormous stone eggs, waiting for their secret to be revealed. And for now, this secret remains one of the most enigmatic and impressive in the history of South America. Oak Island Hoard. The Oak Island Hoard is one of the longest and most complex mysteries associated with treasure hunting. On a small island surrounded by the calm waters of a bay lies a place known as the Money Pit. Legend has it that something valuable is hidden here deep underground. This is supported by ancient stories, strange finds, and traces of engineering structures clearly not created by random people. The mystery began in the late 18th century when 3 young residents noticed a circular depression in the ground. It looked as if some kind of structure had once stood there. Digging, they found wooden planks laid in layers at regular intervals. Each new mark seemed to be part of a vast underground structure. This was unexpected, as the island was thought to be uninhabited. As excavations continued, the mystery deepened. Strange objects were discovered at various levels: pieces of metal, coal, fiber remnants, and other traces of human activity. All of this indicated that there truly was an artificial structure, carefully crafted underground. One of the most astonishing aspects of the pit was the levels where wooden beams were found. They were located almost every few meters. It seemed the builders had planned a path down beforehand, reinforcing the shaft walls to prevent collapse. This requires a great deal of experience and skill, not typically associated with the people who lived in these areas many centuries ago. But the deeper the diggers went, the more difficult it became. At a certain depth, the shaft began to fill with water. It seemed as if the water was coming through underground channels. Attempts to stem the flow proved futile. As soon as the diggers reached a critical level, the water rose instantly. This led researchers to speculate that the underground passages were part of a deliberate defense, designed to prevent anyone from accessing the pit's contents. There's a theory that this system was connected to the sea. The builders may have created channels leading to the shore. When people tried to dig deeper into the pit, ocean water rushed in, making excavation a dangerous undertaking. This engineering solution seems remarkably sophisticated, especially considering it could have been built many centuries ago. Who could have created such a complex system? There are several theories. One of the most popular is the legend of pirate treasure. According to it, a famous pirate may have hidden his treasure in a protected pit, built specifically to prevent anyone from finding it. However, there is little evidence to support this theory. Another theory suggests that the pit was built by members of secret brotherhoods. They may have hidden valuable manuscripts, relics, or artifacts they wanted to protect from enemies. This theory is sometimes supported by the discovery of individual symbols and objects whose origins are difficult to explain. The third theory is more practical. The pit may have served as an ancient storage facility, created by traders or seafarers to protect goods. In this case, the complex system could have been an ingenious way to keep supplies safe. But then the question arises, why did no one return for the contents? Over the years of searching the money pit area, a variety of techniques have been employed. Attempts have been made to pump out water, reinforce passages, and create bypass tunnels. Occasionally, small artifacts have been found, metal fragments, mechanical parts, strange stones with symbols, but no one has discovered any significant treasure. Also of interest is the fact that people have found traces of ancient tools. This suggests that the land had been disturbed long before the first official excavations. Some scientists believe the pit may have existed for several centuries before the first settlers saw it. Despite numerous studies, the mystery remains unsolved. Every attempt to get closer to the solution raises new questions. Why is the security system so complex? What exactly is hidden at the bottom? And most importantly, did the treasure hoard even exist, or is it a mistake that has become a legend? Oak Island has become a symbol of humankind's quest to unravel the mystery. Hundreds of people have dedicated decades to the search. Underwater devices, drilling rigs, and modern technology have been used. But the hole remains stubborn. It seems to protect its secret, preventing anyone from penetrating beyond a certain point. The Oak Island hoard is more than just a story about treasure. It's a story about the unknown craftsmen who created the complex protection. It's a story about people who searched for answers but found only new mysteries. And it's a story about how one small hole on the island became one of the most talked about and enigmatic objects in the world. While there's no definitive answer, the legend remains alive. And every new explorer who sets foot on Oak Island senses that somewhere beneath their feet lies a secret waiting to be revealed. Corridors of light in Antarctica. Antarctica's light corridors are one of the rarest and least studied natural mysteries, appearing only in the harshest corners of the southern continent. Polar explorers sometimes report seeing elongated vertical columns of light suddenly appear amidst the endless ice fields. They rise from the horizon like giant walls of light, remaining visible even at dusk or under thick cloud cover. These phenomena are short-lived, but so memorable that everyone who has witnessed them describes a mystical sensation, as if the ice itself were emitting light. The main characteristic of the corridors is their shape. These are not the typical light pillars that appear during freezing temperatures in cities. Antarctic corridors are wider, smoother, and sometimes appear to stretch for tens of kilometers. They appear over flat patches of ice where the air is particularly dry and cold. But even under these conditions, it's difficult to understand why the beams take this shape. The pillars are often parallel to one another, creating the impression of enormous invisible walls between which one can walk, as if through a canyon of light. The first to describe them were polar explorers waiting out the long winter nights. They reported that sometimes a glow resembling a diffuse dawn would appear over the ice plateau, although true dawn was still far away. Afterward, the glow would rise, forming even vertical stripes. Researchers observing these phenomena noted that the sound at these moments became strange, as if the air were muffling the sound of the wind. Some scientists explain the corridors by light reflections. The cold Antarctic air may contain tiny ice crystals suspended in the atmosphere. If they're positioned at a certain angle, light can reflect off them in smooth lines. But this explanation doesn't explain everything. For example, why do the corridors often appear not in full sunlight, but in dim, diffused light? Or why do the pillars sometimes appear as if the light source is beneath the ice surface? It's hypothesized that the corridors reflect moonlight, which can refract in unusual ways in polar conditions. Antarctic ice fields consist of many layers, and each layer can reflect light slightly differently. If the layers are aligned at a particular angle, they can create a multiple refraction effect, transforming the faint moonlight into vertical walls of light. But even this theory doesn't explain the rarity of the phenomenon. Under the right conditions, it should occur much more frequently. Some researchers are paying attention to the geomagnetic properties of Antarctica. The southern continent is located in a zone where the Earth's magnetic field is particularly active. The southern lights are far from the only effect that can occur when charged particles interact with the icy atmosphere. It has been suggested that the light corridors may be a rare interaction between solar particles and icy dust, or the icy crust covering the surface. These crusts sometimes create thin, layered structures that can reflect light in unusual ways. There's also a hypothesis about so-called ice echoes of light. Some areas of ice consist of multi-year layers that trap the air of past eras. If light hits such structures at a certain angle, it can be reflected multiple times, creating vertical glows. This is similar to the effect of a beam of light bouncing repeatedly between mirror surfaces. However, Antarctic ice is too uneven to create perfectly smooth corridors, though they do appear. Beyond scientific explanations, the corridors of light have given rise to numerous legends. Some polar explorers believe they are a manifestation of ice breathing, a rare natural phenomenon that occurs when pressure changes beneath the ice surface. Others believe they are related to mysterious subglacial lakes. Antarctica conceals hundreds of such lakes beneath the surface, some of which are buried beneath kilometers of ice. If heat from the depths reaches the upper layers, the crystal structure can change, creating optical effects. There are even stories that the corridors of light are sometimes accompanied by rare sounds, muffled clicks, like a distant echo. These sounds occur when the ice sheets contract and expand. But the coincidence of the appearance of light and sound leads some researchers to wonder, is it possible that processes are occurring that we don't yet know about? Antarctica is a place where nature is hidden from humanity not only by distance, but also by time. Here, ice structures take centuries to form, and the atmosphere is so pure and transparent that light behaves differently than anywhere else on Earth. The corridors of light are a rare reminder of how extraordinary phenomena can arise in conditions where human survival is difficult. Each light pillar is like a vertical boundary between the known and the unknown, between Earth and sky. And while researchers continue to observe Antarctica, these light phenomena remain one of the most beautiful and unexplained mysteries of the icy continent. Karahunj. Karahunj is one of the most enigmatic stone structures in Armenia. It is located on a high plateau where the wind blows freely and the sky seems closer to the earth than anywhere else. The first impression of Karahunj is like encountering an ancient calendar or an ancient open-air observatory. Hundreds of stones of varying heights stand in a vast expanse, many with round holes, as if created specifically for observation. The complex's main feature is its layout. The stones are arranged to form long rows, circles, and individual points that may align with the directions of important celestial phenomena. These lines are only visible when viewed from above or from a distance. It seems the builders possessed not only stoneworking skills, but also knowledge of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Each stone tells its own story. Some are taller than a human, while others are more modest, seemingly serving as markers. Most unusual are the round holes in some of the stones. They appear to have been designed for observing celestial objects. The holes are oriented at different angles, and many researchers speculate that they may have been used to observe the sun on specific days or certain stars. One theory is that Karahunj may have been an ancient observatory. Ancient inhabitants may have used the stones as instruments to determine the beginning of seasons, the time of year, or ritual dates. Looking through the hole, one can see the direction in which the sun rises on the summer solstice, or the location where the night reaches its longest in winter. However, there are other theories. Some believe the stones served as sacred sites. Ancient peoples created important centers of worship where ancestor cults or various natural forces could take place. The stones could symbolize spirits that protected the tribes, and the holes could serve as connecting points between earth and sky. In this case, the complex was an open-air temple. There's also a theory that Karahunj served as both an observatory and a ritual site. Ancient people often combined science and spiritual practices, not separating them as strictly as they do today. For them, observing celestial phenomena was part of their worldview. They could see spiritual forces manifesting in the movements of the stars and utilize knowledge of the seasons for fertility rituals. But despite numerous hypotheses, it's difficult to explain the complex's precise purpose. Much of the culture that created Karahunj disappeared, leaving no written traces. This makes the monument particularly enigmatic. We see the result of their labor, but we can't precisely understand its meaning. The way the stones were installed is also intriguing. Some blocks weigh hundreds of kilograms, and their installation required a coordinated effort. A site had to be selected, the site leveled, the stone lifted, and its stability ensured. This demonstrates the builder's organization and experience, as well as a clear understanding of exactly where each element should be placed. It is believed that some of the stones may have been aligned with the stars, which played a special role in ancient cultures. This could be linked to myths or legends about celestial heroes, animals, or spirits. However, this can only be confirmed indirectly, as the precise details have been lost to time. Some stones stand alone, as if serving as markers. Others form circles that may have served as gathering centers. Perhaps people came here to mark important days, perform rituals, or listen to their spiritual leaders. There are also bolder theories. Some researchers believe that Karahunj may have been a site associated with funerary rites. In such complexes, stones could symbolize spiritual transition. However, few traces of such rituals have been found within the complex, making this theory less likely. Today, Karahunj remains an important archaeological and cultural site. Scientists continue to study it, comparing it to other similar structures. Some see parallels with Stonehenge, but Karahunj is more ancient. This makes it not only mysterious, but also unique. The complex stands in a place where a strong wind blows. Here, silence mingles with the rustling of the steppe. The stones seem to converse with one another, echoing the voices of the people who lived here many millennia ago. And each stone is a reminder that ancient peoples knew how to observe the world, understand its rhythm, and create structures that have endured for centuries. Karahunj remains a symbol of ancient wisdom. It holds a secret that we can only guess at, but not fully reveal. And it is precisely this ambiguity that makes it one of the most enigmatic places, where stone, earth, and sky merge into one. Funnels of the Siberian taiga. The Siberian taiga's sinkholes are one of the most terrifying natural mysteries of recent decades. They appear suddenly, as if the earth were opening up and ejecting enormous masses of soil. These structures are almost perfectly round craters extending to great depths. Their edges are smooth and their diameters can reach tens of meters. When researchers first saw these sinkholes, many were overcome by the feeling that they were witnessing the aftermath of some incredibly powerful underground explosion. The main characteristic of craters is their suddenness. A single patch of land might have been covered in thick moss or young tundra shrubs just yesterday. But today, in its place, a huge black shaft gapes, with layers of permafrost visible within. Most astonishingly, the earth around the crater looks as if it's been blown in all directions. Sometimes, chunks of soil fly tens of meters apart, as if fired from within. The researchers were struck by the shape of the sinkholes. They are almost perfectly round. It appears as if something underground suddenly expanded, and then the topsoil, unable to withstand the pressure, was thrown outward. This distinguishes sinkholes from ordinary sinkholes, which typically have jagged edges and are formed by gradual subsidence. One of the first theories involves permafrost. Gases may be trapped deep within the earth, beneath a layer of ice and compressed soil. When the permafrost begins to thaw, the gas is released. If the pressure becomes too great, it can cause an explosion. This explains the ejected chunks of soil and the smooth edges. But the question remains, why did these craters begin to appear now, and why are some of them so large? Another theory suggests that the craters could be the result of hidden underground processes associated with methane accumulation. Permafrost contains enormous quantities of frozen gases. When climate change causes the soil to warm, the methane is released. If the gas accumulates under a layer of solid rock, it could create a natural bomb. But even this theory doesn't explain the whole picture, as methane typically releases gradually, rather than creating such powerful emissions. There's a hypothesis that huge voids filled with water and gas are forming underground. As the pressure builds, the topsoil explodes. This explains the loud sound sometimes heard by residents. However, the voids would have to be unusually large, which raises doubts among some researchers. The mystery of sinkholes is heightened by the fact that many of them appear in hard-to-reach places. The taiga is a land where every step can conceal deep ditches, swamps, and fragile ice. Investigating such phenomena is difficult. There are likely more sinkholes than scientists believe. It's just that many of them go unnoticed immediately after they appear. Some researchers point out that sinkholes often appear in areas where permafrost is particularly unstable. This may suggest a connection between soil heating and crater formation. However, the reason for the sinkhole's perfect shape remains unclear. Nature rarely creates perfect circles. There are also more unusual hypotheses. Some believe the craters may be traces of ancient underground gas vents that have reactivated. Others suggest unusual chemical processes within the permafrost that could trigger the violent release of energy. But evidence for these ideas is still scant. Interestingly, after some time, some sinkholes turn into lakes. Water fills the resulting depression, creating new ecosystems. These lakes appear calm and beautiful, but beneath their surface lies the story of a sudden and powerful natural event. Local residents are wary of the craters. They report occasionally hearing loud pops and later discovering new craters. Some compare the sound to thunder or an explosion, even though there were no thunderstorms or equipment nearby. These stories support the theory of a sudden gas release. However, even if we accept the methane pressure hypothesis, one detail remains. The gas must somehow accumulate in sufficient quantities to erode the soil. This means that deep permafrost processes are changing faster than scientists previously assumed. Researchers studying sinkholes say the phenomenon could be a key to understanding future climate change. If permafrost continues to thaw, the number of such craters could increase. This not only changes the landscape, but also affects the atmosphere, as methane is a potent greenhouse gas. But we can't yet predict with certainty where the next crater will appear or how big it will be. The taiga holds its secrets. Sometimes it seems as if the earth is breathing, quietly but powerfully. And at moments when what's pent up beneath the surface is about to burst forth, nature reminds us of its power. The craters of the Siberian taiga remain a symbol of the world of processes lurking beneath our feet, processes that occur slowly but can manifest suddenly. They frighten, surprise, and make us reflect on how little we know about the depths of the earth. And while scientists continue to study these giant holes in the ground, the taiga will maintain its harsh silence in which such sudden and powerful manifestations of nature are born. Sumerian star maps. Sumerian star maps are one of humanity's most ancient attempts to describe the heavens. These small clay tablets, covered in symbols and drawings, preserve a map of the celestial vault created by people who lived many millennia before our time. The precision and depth of their observations are astounding. It seems incredible that a people who were only just beginning to form their first cities could already study the celestial world so thoroughly. The main feature of Sumerian maps is their combination of simplicity and astonishing accuracy. The tablets contain symbols representing groups of stars, which modern scholars associate with constellations. Some of these constellations retain their images to this day. This suggests that the Sumerians created one of the earliest systems by which people navigated the night sky. The mystery lies in how the Sumerians were able to collect such a vast number of observations. At that time, there were no telescopes, sophisticated instruments, or data recording technologies. All they had were their eyes, memories, and traditions. Yet, they were able to create symbols conveying the positions of celestial bodies, their movements, and their cycles. Researchers believe the Sumerians paid close attention to the sky because they associated it with important events on Earth. They observed the movements of bright stars and planets to predict the changing seasons, determine the best time for sowing and harvesting, and conduct religious rituals. In their culture, the sky was considered the home of the gods. Therefore, studying the heavenly bodies was not only a practical activity, but also a part of their spiritual life. Some tablets are lists of stars grouped according to a certain logic. Others depict celestial figures. Still others resemble diagrams, with lines connecting dots, creating map-like images. All of this testifies to a well-thought-out system. But how exactly the Sumerians arrived at it remains a mystery. It is believed that knowledge of the sky was passed down orally between generations. Ancient observers were able to record the positions of the stars year after year. Gradually, knowledge accumulated and maps were created based on it. Such a process requires patience and persistence. But we are dealing with a people who loved order and observation. This is evident in their customs, architecture, and art. However, there are elements of the maps that raise questions. Some of the drawings appear overly precise, as if the creators possessed knowledge beyond their time. For example, some tablets contain descriptions of celestial events that occur rarely. How could they have known about them if observing such phenomena was only possible during certain periods? Perhaps the observational tradition was so long that it allowed for the collection of unique data. It is believed that the Sumerians may have used unique measuring instruments. Simple devices based on shadows or angles helped them determine the positions of objects in the sky. Such techniques are known in other cultures as well. But the precision they achieved is still astounding. Another mystery is why star charts were so important that they were written on clay. Tablets are durable. They have survived centuries, earthquakes, and destruction. This suggests that the Sumerians considered celestial knowledge something important and enduring, worthy of preservation for generations to come. It is believed that star charts were used by priests. They may have served as the basis for calendars, rituals, and predictions. In ancient cultures, celestial observers often held high positions. Their knowledge was considered valuable. If priests could predict natural phenomena, this strengthened their power. But there are even more daring theories. Some researchers believe the Sumerians may have possessed knowledge derived from ancient traditions lost by other peoples. Perhaps they inherited ancient observations made even before the formation of their civilization. However, there is no direct evidence for this, so it remains a hypothesis. Interestingly, modern researchers are still discovering new tablets. Each new artifact adds detail. Sometimes new finds confirm old theories, and sometimes they completely change our understanding. But in all cases, they demonstrate how profound ancient people's knowledge of the heavens was. Sumerian star maps remain a quiet testimony to humanity's quest to understand the world around us from the very beginning. They remind us that the desire to observe, compare, and seek patterns is part of human nature. These maps are more than just an ancient tool. They are our distant ancestors' gaze into infinity. And the more we study them, the more we understand. The Sumerians saw the sky not only as a mystery, but also as a path to understanding life. Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is one of the most astonishing artifacts discovered in ancient civilizations. At first glance, it appears to be a simple ceramic vessel. But inside it lie components that appear to be parts of a primitive device capable of generating a weak electric current. This discovery has sparked a great deal of controversy because it is approximately 2,000 years old, and understanding electricity at that time was considered impossible. The vessel consists of 3 elements. It's a ceramic pot with a copper cylindrical shell inserted into it and an iron rod in the center. The bottom of the rod doesn't touch the copper shell, and the top protrudes outward. When an acidic liquid, such as grape juice or vinegar, is poured into it, a simple reaction occurs that can generate a small electrical charge. The main question troubling researchers is whether this device was actually used to generate electricity or whether it served an entirely different purpose. Some scientists believe the device could have been a container for storing scrolls or small valuable items. But that would make the combination of metals more difficult to explain. The design appears too sophisticated for a simple container. Proponents of the electrical theory offer interesting arguments. Firstly, copper and iron are metals that can generate voltage when exposed to acid. Secondly, the shape of the device resembles modern batteries, albeit in a more primitive form. Thirdly, similar vessels have been found more than once, suggesting a recurring technology. However, there is no direct evidence of electrical use, leaving room for doubt. It is believed that these vessels could have been used for electroplating metals. This is a process in which a thin layer of another metal, such as silver or gold, is applied to the surface of an object. This method allows for the creation of jewelry or ritual objects with a beautiful shine. Supporters of this theory believe that there is little definitive evidence, but the possibility itself seems logical. Interestingly, some ancient jewelry is indeed coated with a thin metallic layer. However, it's unclear whether electricity or other methods were used for this. Ancient cultures employed various methods of surface decoration, and not all of them required sophisticated technology. There's also a more unusual theory. Some researchers suggest the vessels were used in rituals. Perhaps the iron rod, interacting with the liquid, created a slight tingling sensation. People could have perceived this as the presence of a force, or spirits. At that time, the device wasn't a battery in the modern sense, but rather served a religious purpose. One of the most intriguing aspects is the lack of written evidence. No one has ever described the use of such vessels. If they were truly widely used, traces should have been preserved in writings or drawings. But not a single surviving text mentions this. This begs the question, was this technology known only to a small circle of artisans? Or did it serve such a simple function that it was not considered worthy of mention? The discovery of vessels in different locations suggests that they were made repeatedly. People could have perceived them as ordinary objects intended for household or ritual purposes. But the combination of components is so unusual that it's difficult to believe they were a coincidence. Some researchers believe the battery wasn't a technical device, but rather served to demonstrate unusual effects. If you fill a vessel with acid and combine the metal with moisture, you'll feel a slight tingling sensation. Ancient people may have used such effects in rituals to surprise or convince those present of the power of their rituals. The problem is that no single theory explains everything. The electrical theory is too bold. The ritual theory is too vague. The metal plating theory is unproven. The discovery remains on the border between science and mystery. Among other things, the context of the era is important. People of that time possessed extensive craftsmanship. They knew how to work with metal, glass, fabric, herbs, and acids. Sometimes these skills produced astonishing results that today are perceived as technological mysteries. The Baghdad battery remains a shining example of how ancient civilizations may have mastered far more complex practices than we currently imagine. Perhaps one day, archaeologists will discover new evidence that will reveal the true purpose of these vessels. For now, this discovery continues to amaze, provoke doubt, and expand our understanding of what was possible in the distant past. Devil's Kettle Falls. Devil's Kettle is one of the most unusual natural places, and not everyone knows about it. At first glance, it's simply a beautiful waterfall, split into two streams by a huge boulder. One part falls down normally, forming a turbulent torrent. The other disappears into a round stone funnel, as if the water were falling into the underworld. This disappearance is what made the waterfall famous. The main mystery is that the water that flows into the stone pit has been nowhere to be found for a long time. There's no trace of an underground outlet, no stream, no spring, nothing. It seems as if an entire river disappears underground and never returns. People have tried various explanations, but each hypothesis has encountered difficulties. Some suggested a huge cave beneath the waterfall where the stream drained. But in that case, there would have to be sinkholes or at least damp areas nearby. Others believed the water escaped into a network of small cracks that extended very far. But then it would still have to emerge in the surrounding bodies of water. No such places were found. Many researchers attempted experiments. They dropped bright dyes, small objects, and lightweight wooden balls into the water. All of this was supposed to help trace the flow's path. But the results were strange. The objects disappeared into the funnel, never to reappear. Observing what was happening inside the stone pit was impossible. It descended vertically, and the water obscured the view. Thus, the waterfall became a local legend. People told stories of mystical depths, of how the sinkhole could lead to underground lakes or even ancient cavities. Of course, these are more like beautiful fairy tales, but they convey the overall feeling. The place seems unreal. However, it's important to understand that nature sometimes creates seemingly improbable forms that have a very mundane explanation. Over time, a new theory emerged. Scientists have suggested that the stone funnel is a kind of drain leading into a very narrow but long channel. The stream moves through it under high pressure and then emerges into the river near the waterfall, mixing with the main water so quickly and deeply that it remains unnoticed. To test this theory, researchers used methods to measure water volume. They compared the amount of water falling into the normal portion of the waterfall with the total volume of water in the river downstream. They found that the river doesn't lose volume. This means that the water disappearing into the vortex still returns to the stream, albeit imperceptibly. This is an important detail, but it doesn't reveal all the subtleties. The channel through which the stream flows has never been discovered. The terrain is complex, and the rock in this region could have cracked and shifted over many centuries. The water currents could have carved their way through hidden cavities, but these passages are impossible to see. They are too narrow and deep. It is believed that water can flow through a network of micro cracks in the rock. The stream then breaks into numerous thin streams, which merge again downstream. This process is invisible to the eye and almost impossible to measure. This mechanism seems improbable, but it does occur in nature. What's also interesting is how long this mystery has captivated people's imaginations. For years, tourists, travelers, and scientists have come to the waterfall, observing it and trying to understand where the water goes. The place has become a symbol of how, even in the modern world, where it seems everything has been studied and measured, there are phenomena that challenge our understanding. But even if part of the mystery has already been solved, the waterfall retains its magic. Anyone standing nearby hears a powerful roar, sees one stream crashing against the rocks and the other disappearing into the unknown. This contrast creates an almost mystical impression. It's as if nature itself wants to remind us of its own unpredictability. Devil's Kettle remains an example of how a simple observation can turn into a great mystery. We can't always see what's happening deep underground, and even when science offers an explanation, the place continues to retain a sense of the unusual. There's something ancient, inexplicable, and compelling about it. And as long as the sinkhole continues to swallow the stream, people will return to this waterfall again and again to witness with their own eyes one of nature's strangest mysteries. Taos hum. The Taos hum is one of the most mysterious sound anomalies recorded in the modern world. It's a low-frequency, barely perceptible vibration in the air, heard by only a select few people living or visiting the area around Taos, New Mexico. The hum appears unexpectedly. Sometimes it lasts for minutes, sometimes for hours. It seems distant, sometimes very close, as if a giant mechanism were at work underground. But the strangest thing is that no one has been able to determine the source of the sound. The main characteristic of the Taos hum is that not everyone hears it. Several people in one house may feel the vibration, while others experience absolute silence. Some describe the hum as a soft rumble, others as distant thunder, and still others as the monotonous sound of a running engine. People also note that the hum is sometimes accompanied by a feeling of pressure in the ears, as when climbing a mountain or before a change in the weather. Stories of a mysterious sound emerged in the late 20th century when residents began complaining of a persistent low tone, unlike ordinary household noises. The first observations garnered numerous descriptions, but they all boiled down to one thing: a deep, vibrating sound unrelated to any known technology or phenomenon. Scientists became interested in the phenomenon and attempted to determine the cause of the hum. One of the first theories was technical. Taos is surrounded by power lines, industrial facilities, and roads. The vibrations could have come from large transformers, machinery, or traffic. But measurements showed no match. The infrastructure sounds did not match the frequency or behavior of the hum. The next theory concerned geological activity. Microseismic movements can occur underground, too weak to be felt as earthquakes, but strong enough to produce low-pitched sounds. Such vibrations do sometimes occur in areas with underground cavities, tectonic transitions, or underground rivers. But Taos isn't located in an unusual seismic zone, and measurements haven't revealed any persistent microtremors. There was also an atmospheric theory. Low-frequency sounds can travel long distances, reflecting off layers of the atmosphere. Perhaps the hum was coming from far away, from airplanes, industrial facilities, or even weather-related phenomena. But then the hum would have been heard more frequently and more uniformly, not just in isolated spots or by a certain group of people. One of the most surprising hypotheses has to do with human physiology. Some scientists believe the Taos hum may be caused by a combination of low-frequency vibrations and hearing characteristics. Some people are sensitive to infrasound, frequencies below the threshold of normal hearing. Infrasound can occur naturally, for example, when winds pass between certain landforms or when air currents interact with rocks. Perhaps the valley around Taos creates unique acoustic conditions, amplifying low frequencies. But if this is true, why does the hum only occur occasionally? Why do only some people hear it? This remains unclear. There are more daring hypotheses. Some believe the hum is related to underground voids or abandoned tunnels, where sound can be amplified and reflected. Others suggest the hum may be the result of magnetic field interactions. However, there is no direct evidence to support these ideas. There are also legends. Local residents associate the hum with ancient spiritual sites. They say the earth can speak, and the hum is a manifestation of a power that has existed here for centuries. Such stories are passed down from elders and are considered part of ancient traditions. Interestingly, the Tao's hum affects people differently. Some find it irritating, causing headaches or anxiety. Others feel only a slight vibration and become accustomed to it. Most people don't hear the hum at all, which makes the phenomenon even stranger. Scientists installed sensitive instruments to detect the source of the sound. Some sensors detected weak vibrations at low frequencies, but the frequencies were too varied to be explained by a single phenomenon. Other instruments recorded nothing, even when people claimed to hear a hum. The Tao's hum remains an example of how the boundary between human perception and physical reality can be extremely thin. Perhaps the hum is a combination of natural factors acting simultaneously. Perhaps it is a rare atmospheric phenomenon that we have not yet described. Or perhaps it is a mystery related to the hearing and perception peculiarities of a certain group of people. While there's no definitive explanation, the Tao's hum remains part of the region's mystical atmosphere. It reminds us that the world around us is filled with sounds and processes we can't always understand or measure. It has become a legend, a scientific mystery, and a symbol of how, even in the age of technology, phenomena remain that evade explanation. The Tao's hum is a quiet, invisible, yet persistent mystery of the desert that continues to attract researchers, travelers, and lovers of the unexplained from all over the world. A lake changing color. A color-changing lake is one of those natural phenomena that leaves even seasoned researchers scratching their heads. Imagine a body of water that glows a soft turquoise in the morning, turns deep green during the day, turns dark purple in the evening, and sometimes even bright red. The color changes not just seasonally, but throughout the day, as if the lake has a life of its own, responding to invisible processes. Such lakes are found in various parts of the world, but each one is a unique mystery that demands careful study. The first thing that strikes you about these bodies of water is the unpredictability of their changes. The water may appear completely ordinary, but suddenly acquire a rich hue, as if someone had added paint to it. Sometimes the color change occurs slowly, and the observer notices it only upon comparison. Other times it is abrupt. The water seems to flash with a new color, reflecting light in such a way that the hue changes in a matter of minutes. There are lakes that change color depending on the time of day. The morning sun creates one set of conditions, daylight creates another, and the evening rays create deep hues. But there are also lakes that change regardless of the lighting, as if complex chemical or biological processes were taking place within the water itself. Scientists have identified several possible explanations. One involves microalgae. Certain species of algae can change color depending on temperature, light levels, or oxygen levels. When they become abundant, the water takes on a new hue. However, this explanation doesn't apply to all lakes. In some, the algae concentration is too low to cause such dramatic changes. Another theory concerns minerals. If the lake contains a lot of salts or metals, they can interact with sunlight, reflecting and refracting it differently. For example, copper salts can produce a green tint, while iron compounds can produce a red tint. But that raises the question, why does the color change so quickly? Minerals don't appear and disappear in minutes. This suggests that the changes occur on the lake's surface, where the thin mineral films react to wind or light. There are lakes inhabited by special microorganisms that change color depending on the rhythm of the day. When the sun rises, they become active and begin to secrete substances that create a specific hue. At night, they fall asleep and the color disappears. However, such organisms are extremely rare, meaning this explanation only applies to isolated cases. The most mysterious lakes are those whose color changes without apparent biological cause. In some bodies of water, underground springs interact with surface water. If the temperature or composition of the groundwater changes, this can trigger reactions that affect the lake's color. But such phenomena are difficult to study because the springs are located deep and often inaccessible. There are even suggestions that the color change is related to natural magnetic fields. If the region has strong underground structures, they could influence particle movement or mineral distribution. However, there is insufficient evidence to support this theory. It's also interesting that many color-changing lakes are located in hard-to-reach places. Sometimes these are high mountains where sunlight is reflected at unusual angles. Other times they're deserts where the air is dry and clear and the water reacts to the slightest changes in conditions. But even under these conditions, there are instances that cannot be explained by conventional methods. For example, the lake may change color on a cloudy day when there is no direct sunlight, or the water may become brighter after a strong wind. Such observations prompt researchers to seek deeper causes related to the lake's internal processes. Some lakes have a unique bottom structure. Layers of mineral deposits can reflect the color of the water below. However, this is only possible in very clear lakes. In other cases, the color changes precisely at the surface, where thin layers of algae, bacteria, or microminerals form. One of the most mysterious lakes is the one locals call the Chameleon Lake. It changes color up to 5 times a day, and no one knows exactly why. People who live nearby say that if you look at the lake long enough, you can see its surface slowly darken or lighten, as if the water is breathing. Some local legends attribute the color changes to water spirits. They say the lake is alive. It senses the weather, people's moods, and even thoughts. Such stories sound like myths, but they reflect perceptions that have been shaped over centuries. There are legends that say the lake serves as a mirror for the sky. It changes color depending on the forces or entities present in the heavens at the moment. The scientific approach, of course, seeks specific causes. But the phenomenon remains a mystery because each lake is unique. In one, minerals predominate; in another, organisms; in a third, a combination of sources; and in others, a combination of factors may be at work that cannot yet be reproduced in the laboratory. A color-changing lake is a living organism that creates a new light pattern every minute. It's a natural painting where the colors never repeat. When you look at such bodies of water, you get the feeling that you're looking at more than just water, but a special life form that communicates with the world through color. And while science tries to unravel the causes of these phenomena, the lakes continue to amaze travelers and researchers, demonstrating that even the quietest water can hold a secret comparable to the vast mysteries of the earth. Crystal skulls. Crystal skulls are one of the most striking and memorable archaeological mysteries. Dozens of skulls carved from transparent or translucent quartz have been found on different continents. They look so perfect that they seem to have been crafted using modern technology. But the origin of most of these skulls remains unclear. Each skull has a unique shape. The surface is smooth, without traces of rough work. The facial features are meticulously detailed: the eye sockets, the nose, the cheekbones, and the internal cavity. Some skulls are so perfectly polished that they reflect the light like a crystal figurine. Others have a simpler shape, but are still impressive in their craftsmanship. The main mystery lies in how they were created. Quartz is an extremely hard material. Cutting and polishing it requires techniques unavailable to ancient craftsmen. Modern tools using high-frequency vibrations or diamond tips make it possible to process quartz, but such methods did not exist thousands of years ago. Proponents of the ancient origin of the skulls believe that the artisans used a combination of friction, sand, water, and immense patience. By hand working the stone for months or even years, a smooth surface can be achieved. However, this theory is questionable, as some skulls have such fine lines and complex shapes that creating them by hand is extremely difficult. No less mysterious is the location of these artifacts' discovery. Several skulls appeared in collections in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Collectors claimed that the skulls belonged to ancient Central American peoples. This suggested they were connected to the Mayan or Aztec cultures. The legends of these peoples do indeed contain descriptions of crystal objects that possessed the power of knowledge or served as symbols of connection with the spirit world. The problem, however, is that there are almost no direct archaeological finds. The skulls were added to collections already in their original form, often without the exact location of their discovery. This raises doubts about their authenticity. If the object truly belonged to an ancient culture, it should have been found during excavations in the context of other artifacts. But such confirmation is extremely limited. Despite this, legends about crystal skulls persist. One of the most famous stories tells of 12 or 13 skulls that must supposedly be brought together at a special moment. Then they will reveal knowledge about the origins of the world, or give humanity an important warning. This sounds like a myth, but it adds to the artifact's mystical appeal. Some researchers believe the skulls may have served a ritual function. Their transparency and ability to reflect light made them ideal objects for rituals. Placing a skull so that sunlight shines through, it creates an unusual play of light. This could symbolize a connection with gods or spirits. Others suggest that the skulls served as status symbols. They may have been symbols of power or belonged to priests who used them during important ceremonies. Ancient cultures often feature objects crafted from rare materials and reserved exclusively for the elite. But there's also a more skeptical theory. It suggests that many crystal skulls may have been made not in ancient times, but in modern times. In the 19th century, interest in ancient cultures grew. Collectors eagerly acquired artifacts associated with mysteries and legends. Some artisans may have created quartz skulls to sell as antiquities. To support this theory, researchers point to processing marks reminiscent of modern tools. However, even if some of the skulls were indeed created later, this does not explain all the finds. Several specimens exhibit characteristics that cannot be associated with modern methods. This leaves room for doubt and maintains interest in the mystery. Crystal skulls are also intriguing because of their effect on the imagination. They seem alive, as if information or energy were hidden within them. People report strange sensations in their presence, unusual reflections of light, and feelings arising from touching their smooth surface. There's no scientific evidence to support this, but such stories make the skulls even more mysterious. These artifacts teeter on the border between the possible and the incredible. They captivate not only by their form, but also by the way they provoke thought. What could ancient craftsmen have been capable of? What knowledge was lost? And could the legends about crystal objects have a basis in reality? Until science provides a definitive answer, crystal skulls remain one of the most beautiful and incomprehensible mysteries. They remind us that the past has the power to surprise, raise questions, and leave room for awe at mastery we cannot yet fully explain. Tiwanaku Moon Window. The Tiwanaku Moon Window is one of the most enigmatic structures in the ancient city, located on a high plateau in the Andes Mountains. Among the monolithic walls, perfectly fitted stones, and unusual geometric shapes, there is a unique feature, a stone opening resembling a window. It is positioned so that moonlight on certain nights filters through it with astonishing precision, creating a soft glow within the structure. But the most important thing about this window is not only its beauty, but also its meaning, which remains a mystery to this day. The first thing that strikes you about the window is its shape. It's carved from solid stone with such precision that it seems the craftsman used tools far beyond those of antiquity. The corners of the window are perfectly square, the edges are smooth, and the stone surface is meticulously finished. This begs the question, what methods were used by the builders to achieve such precision? The stone from which the window is made is extremely hard, and no traces of metal tools capable of working it have been found. The second mystery is the window's position relative to the moon. On certain nights, especially during the full moon, the moon's rays pass precisely through the center of the opening, falling on the inner platform or wall. This light creates a pattern that changes depending on the moon's phase. Sometimes the light forms a thin line, sometimes a wide band. In ancient times, this may have had symbolic or ritual significance. But the most astonishing thing is that the window functions as a kind of calendar. If you observe the light throughout the year, you'll notice it changing direction. Researchers suggest the window could have been used to mark important dates, days associated with lunar cycles, agricultural seasons, or rituals. But to create such a system, a profound knowledge of astronomy was required. Where the ancient inhabitants acquired this knowledge remains unclear. It is believed that the window was part of a more complex structure. It may have served not only for observing the moon, but also to allow light to fall on certain symbols or statues. However, many parts of Tiahuanaco have been destroyed or displaced, so an accurate reconstruction is still lacking. Some researchers believe the lunar window may have been connected to spiritual life. In Andean cultures, the moon held a special place. She was considered a goddess, the guardian of water, night, and the cycle of life. Moonlight could symbolize the connection between the earthly and the heavenly, between humans and deities. If the window was indeed used in rituals, it could have been a point of interaction between the visible and invisible worlds. However, there is a more unusual theory. Some scholars believe the window may have been an ancient instrument for observing celestial phenomena. Its shape and angle are reminiscent of devices later used in other cultures to measure the positions of stars. But if it is indeed an instrument, another question arises. Why is it made from a huge monolith and not from simpler materials? Some believe the window may have been part of a communication system. If, on certain nights, moonlight passed through the window and reflected off a polished surface or another structure, it could have served as a signal to distant settlements. However, there is no direct evidence for this. It's also interesting that the lunar window is perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions. This is another indication of the precise knowledge of celestial movements. If you look through the window on certain days, you can see not only the moon, but also several stars that played an important role in the worldview of ancient peoples. Some researchers have discovered that the window creates an unusual effect when weak light passes through. Moonbeams passing through the narrow opening create a soft haze in the air, as if the light is becoming denser. This could be caused by dust particles or ice crystals in the night air, but the effect appears as if the window were designed specifically for this purpose. It creates a unique atmosphere, reminiscent of a mystical vision. There are theories related to acoustics. Some believe the window could have served not only as a source of light, but also as a source of sound. If a person stands in front of the window and pronounces words in a certain position, the sound reflects off the walls, creating an effect of amplification or a change in timbre. This could have been used in rituals to create special auditory sensations. However, further research is needed to confirm these theories. One of the most puzzling details is the marks on the stone around the window. It appears to have been in use for many generations. The stone around the opening is slightly polished, suggesting constant human contact or exposure to light and wind. But the edges of the window itself remain clear and smooth, which is surprising for such an ancient structure. The Tiwanaku moon window remains one of the most symbolic elements of the ancient city. It combines precision, beauty, spirituality, and scientific interest. It is part observational instrument, part temple, and part monument facing the sky. And while researchers continue to explore Tiahuanaco, the moon window remains a quiet reminder that ancient peoples possessed a profound knowledge of the world that we are only beginning to understand. It stands motionless, a gateway between eras, letting in moonlight just as it did thousands of years ago. Singing of the dunes. The singing of the dunes is one of the most unusual sound phenomena in nature. Imagine, someone is walking along a sandy slope, making an ordinary movement, and suddenly a deep vibrating sound spreads around them. It resembles the hum of a large musical instrument or a low chant, as if a voice emerges from the depths of the dunes that no one expects to hear. These sounds are so powerful that they can be heard hundreds of meters away, and sometimes even recorded on equipment. But there is still no definitive explanation for why sand can sing. The main characteristic of this phenomenon is its unpredictability. Some dunes sing constantly, others only at certain times of the year, and still others very rarely. The sound occurs when humans or wind force large masses of sand downslope. The phenomenon is especially pronounced during sand avalanches, when the surface begins to crumble in a single sheet. It is at this moment that the air between the particles begins to vibrate, producing a low, drawn-out hum. But if it's so simple, why is dune singing so rare? Why doesn't every desert sing, even though sand is everywhere? This is where the mystery begins. Researchers have noted that the sand of the singing dunes has special properties. Its particles are roughly uniform in size, rounded, and covered with a thin, smooth film. Wind has been grinding them for centuries, turning each grain into a tiny, perfectly polished sphere. As the sand moves, it begins to rub against each other in a uniform rhythm. But even this doesn't explain why the sound can be so loud and deep, reminiscent of the hum of a huge musical instrument. There's a theory that hidden cavities exist within the sand dunes. When sand slides through these cavities, the air inside vibrates, amplifying the sound like a musical resonator. However, there's little evidence to support this. The dunes are constantly changing shape, making it very difficult to study their interior spaces. Some researchers believe that the moisture content of the sand plays a significant role. Dry desert conditions make the sand too loose, and a small amount of moisture can make it sticky. Sometimes a tiny amount of moisture deep within a dune is enough to create the perfect environment for vibration. But this doesn't explain why the sound only occurs at certain times of the day, or only with certain wind speeds. Interestingly, different dunes sing with different voices. Some emit a low hum, others a vibration similar to ringing or rumbling. Sometimes the sound is so loud that it vibrates the surrounding air. People have described it as the bass note of a giant organ, the voice of the earth, or the singing of ancient spirits. Some deserts have been known for their singing for centuries. Travelers of the past told of nights when the sands would begin to emit low sounds for no apparent reason, as if there was movement deep within the earth. Locals often associated this with legends. In some cultures, the singing of the dunes was considered the voice of the desert, speaking to people. In others, it was a warning. There have been reports of the dunes singing even without moving. The wind created a special current flowing through the crests, causing them to sound like a giant string. People living nearby claimed to hear night voices, and for a long time were unable to understand their source. Scientists tried to reproduce the phenomenon in the laboratory using identical sand grains and vibrations. In some experiments, sound did indeed occur, but it was much weaker than in nature. True dune singing is more than just the friction of sand grains. It involves many factors: dune shape, sand density, temperature, humidity, wind strength, slope type, and even underlying layers. One of the most intriguing theories is that the dune must be mature. That is, formed over centuries with a consistent slope, sand content, and wind direction. Only such dunes can accumulate and release vibrations. If the dune structure is disrupted, it stops singing, sometimes forever. This makes the phenomenon even more unique. The power of the sounds is also astonishing. Sometimes they are heard at such a volume that they cause a shudder in the chest. Others are barely perceptible, like a distant hum. Some travelers reported that the singing surrounded them on all sides, creating a sense of the presence of something enormous and invisible. Why the dune sings at this precise moment also remains a mystery. Perhaps it depends on the temperature of the sand, which fluctuates throughout the day. Perhaps the decisive factor is the speed at which the sand grains roll. Or perhaps we're witnessing a phenomenon where everything is working simultaneously, creating an effect that remains impossible to fully explain. The singing of the dunes is more than just a natural phenomenon. It's a reminder that even ordinary sand holds secrets. In endless deserts, where it seems nothing lives, the earth suddenly begins to resonate, sometimes softly, sometimes powerfully, but always unexpectedly. The dunes sing as if they were telling the story of the planet, the story of wind, time, and endless change. And while science struggles to explain this phenomenon, the deserts continue to amaze all who dare to enter their quiet, yet far from silent world. Death Valley, moving stones. Death Valley in the United States is one of the hottest and harshest places on Earth. But there's a mystery here that has puzzled researchers for decades. Heavy stones that move on their own across the surface of a dry lake bed. The movement is slow and imperceptible, but the stone's marks, long, even furrows, are left in the cracked earth. It's as if someone or something is moving the stones at night under the cover of the wind and silence. The main feature of this phenomenon is that no one has ever observed the movement itself. People have found stones in new locations, even though they had been motionless the day before. The movement marks could be straight, curved, intersecting with others, or ending abruptly. The stones moved along various trajectories, sometimes traveling tens of meters. The moving stones vary in size. Some are small, like a palm. Others are enormous, weighing tens of kilograms. Yet they all leave long tracks on the dry lake bed, indicating their direction. Large stones move more slowly and leave wide furrows, while small ones are narrow and thin. When researchers first encountered this phenomenon, many theories arose. Some believed the stones were being pushed by strong gusts of wind. However, large stones are too heavy to be moved by even a very strong wind, especially on a flat surface. Furthermore, the tracks showed complex curves, reminiscent of movement along invisible roads. Another theory suggested the possible involvement of ice sheets. On rare cold nights, ice could form on the surface of a thin layer of water. If a stone fell into the ice crust, the wind could move this ice, pushing the stone along with it. But even this theory remained unproven for a long time, because the region experiences too few prolonged periods of freezing temperatures in winter. Furthermore, rock movement sometimes occurred during periods when nighttime temperatures weren't cold enough for ice to form. Some tracks appeared to be moving across a wet surface, but without an icy crust. There were also more daring hypotheses. Some suggested that the rocks could be moving due to underground vibrations. If processes were occurring underground that caused small tremors or movements, they could affect the surface. But this area is not known for its seismic activity. Other researchers link the movement of the stones to rare weather conditions. For example, a combination of rain, wind, and a sudden cold snap could have created unique soil conditions. Water soaking into the clay surface makes it smooth and slippery. Wind hitting the stones could have moved them short distances. But even so, the question remained: how to explain the synchronicity of some movements? Sometimes several stones moved in parallel, as if someone had dragged them together. Wind cannot always explain such coincidences. Interestingly, the stones sometimes change direction unexpectedly. The trail might run straight and then turn sharply. If the stones were moved by the wind, such sharp turns would be unlikely. This led some researchers to speculate that the key lies in the soil itself. Death Valley is a place where the surface of a dry lake bed is covered with a thick layer of clay, which can change its properties. When water hits it, it becomes soggy and extremely slippery. Even a light wind can move objects across this surface. And if a stone lands on a slightly sloped area, it can move under its own weight, especially if the moisture is unevenly distributed. But this doesn't explain why some of the tracks resemble pre-calculated trajectories. They're too smooth, too precise, as if the stone moved confidently along a predetermined path. It's hypothesized that the rock's movement is linked to both thin ice and water. When the water freezes slightly at night, ice sheets form around the rocks. As the sun begins to rise, the ice melts unevenly. This process can create small forces that push the rocks. The trajectory may depend on the shape of the ice, the wind, the direction of melting, and the surface structure. In recent years, researchers have installed cameras and sensors to try to capture the moment of movement. Although they have managed to obtain some recordings of stones moving very slowly across a wet surface, the mystery remains. These data reveal only part of the process, but they don't explain all the cases. Moving stones capture the imagination because they remind us that even the simplest objects can behave unexpectedly. Stones are a symbol of stillness, and seeing their traces on the ground, like the footprints of living creatures, creates a sense of a hidden force at work in the desert. Death Valley remains silent. The sun scorches the earth, and the stones continue to move as if living their own strange, slow life. They leave traces, evidence of their movement, but they don't reveal the secret of the force that propels them. And while scientists continue to study this place, moving stones remain one of the most poetic mysteries of nature, where on the border between science and mysticism stands an ordinary stone, capable of what seems impossible. Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are one of those enigmas that simultaneously astound with the simplicity of their form and the complexity of their design. Enormous designs are carved onto a flat desert plain. Straight lines, giant animal figures, spirals, trapezoids, and strange arrow-like shapes. They can only be fully seen from above, which immediately raises the question, why were they created, and how did they do it, for those who had no means of flight? The main characteristic of the lines is their scale. Some figures reach sizes comparable to several city blocks. For example, the drawing of a bird stretches for hundreds of meters, while the monkey or spider are so large that a single person could follow their contours for minutes. But the lines are so precise, it seems as if they were drawn by people fluent in modern marking techniques, although in fact, everything was created with simple tools. The technique for creating the drawings involved removing the dark top layer of stones. Beneath it lay the lighter soil. When the stones were removed, a line emerged, standing out vividly against the desert backdrop. But ensuring the lines were even required a large team and precise organization. The question arises, how could ancient artists create such figures without seeing them in their entirety? Some theorize that they used markings based on simple geometric principles. For example, they measured distances with ropes, placed pegs, and marked right angles. This is similar to the methods of land surveyors. Some researchers believe that artists created small models of their designs and then enlarged them using a grid, just as an artist might enlarge a painting on a wall. But while it is possible to construct a logical chain with technology, the purpose of the lines remains a mystery. One theory suggests that the drawings were part of rituals associated with celestial phenomena. Many of the figures are oriented in specific directions, which may coincide with the position of the sun on specific days of the year. If this idea is correct, the lines could have served as a kind of calendar, helping to predict the seasons. Another theory is related to water. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest regions in the world. Survival here has always been tied to finding sources of moisture. Some researchers believe the lines may have marked the directions of underground channels carrying water. At that point, the drawings were not religious symbols, but rather a kind of signpost. There's also speculation about a ritualistic function. Perhaps ancient people walked along these lines during major ceremonies. Many of the figures resemble paths along which one could move. Such processions were common in various cultures. People could walk along the lines, depicting a path associated with the movements of celestial bodies or myths. But the most mysterious are the animals and strange figures. Why do the drawings include a hummingbird, a monkey, a spider, and even a figure resembling a human with large eyes? Some believe the animals symbolized spirits or were connected to legends. Others believe the drawings reflected the ancient desert dwellers' connection to nature, its cycles and signs. The lines' longevity adds a special mystery. They have remained intact for centuries. The climate here is virtually constant, winds are light, and there is no rain. Therefore, the lines created long ago still look almost exactly as they did when they were first created. They are a unique natural archive, preserving the ancient efforts of humans almost intact. What's also interesting is that the drawings were created over a long period. Some lines are much older than others. This suggests that the tradition was important for many generations. But why it didn't change dramatically and retain the same forms remains a question. There are also controversial but popular ideas. Some believe the drawings were intended for observers from above. However, ancient peoples didn't have flying machines. Therefore, proponents of this theory suggest they were balloons that could have risen to a low altitude. However, there is no evidence for this. Despite numerous studies, each theory explains only part of the mystery. Some lines resemble processional routes, others directional markers, and still others symbols. Each group of designs may have its own purpose, and this is one of the most intriguing features of the Nazca lines. They intertwine different ideas, different eras, and different rituals. The Nazca lines remain a monument to human determination. They demonstrate that humans can create amazing and complex forms even without modern technology. These are more than just drawings. They are an entire world etched into the earth. And while we continue to explore the desert, it is slow to reveal all its secrets, preserving the magic that attracts researchers from around the world. Ohio Serpent Mound. Serpent Mound is one of the most enigmatic earthen structures created by the ancient peoples of North America. Situated on a hill, it perfectly resembles the shape of a huge, writhing snake. Viewed from above, the mound's head is open, as if the snake were holding an egg or a solar disk in its mouth. The length of the entire structure is astonishing. It stretches for hundreds of meters, resembling a gigantic living symbol. The mound is made of earth, but its construction requires a high degree of skill. The surface is smooth and precise, and the curves are smooth, as if drawn with an invisible compass. To create such a form, the ancient artisans must have been able to see the entire design. This is astonishing. How did they manage to achieve such precision when they worked only from the earth and grass, without the ability to reach high? One possible explanation is precise planning. People could have built the mound using markings and landmarks. They could have placed sticks, stretched ropes, and checked angles and directions. Such methods are known in ancient cultures and allow for the creation of fairly precise forms. But even with this approach, the result is impressive, as the mound retained its perfect outlines after many centuries. The purpose of the mound remains one of the main mysteries. The most popular theory relates to astronomy. Scientists have noticed that the orientation of the mound's head aligns with the position of the sun during specific days of the year. For example, at the beginning of summer, the rays of the rising sun can fall directly on the part that resembles an open mouth. This led researchers to believe that the mound served as a kind of calendar linked to solar cycles. There's a theory that the snake symbolized an important spirit or deity. For many ancient peoples, the snake was a significant image. It could represent wisdom, rebirth, or the connection between earth and sky. Perhaps the burial mound served as an open-air temple where rituals were performed related to the changing seasons, the harvest, or the veneration of ancestral spirits. Other researchers believe the mound may have served as a gathering place. It is located on a hill with a wide view of the surrounding area. Important ceremonies were often held in such places. People may have gathered here to celebrate special days, perform rituals, or resolve important issues. The enormous snake beneath their feet may have served as a symbol of strength and unity. Interestingly, no objects were found near the mound that could accurately indicate its purpose. There are no burials, no artifacts related to any rituals. This deepens the mystery. The mound's creators invested enormous labor into it, but left no traces explaining its purpose. The very shape of the snake raises many questions. Why a snake? Why is it holding an egg in its mouth? Perhaps it has something to do with the concept of the birth of the world. In many cultures, the egg is a symbol of the beginning of life, and the snake is a keeper of secrets or a guide between worlds. If the burial mound truly depicts this symbol, then its creators may have been attempting to express the idea of birth, the eternal cycle of nature, and a connection with celestial forces. There are also more practical theories. Some scholars believe the mound could have served as a landmark. Its enormous size would have made it visible from afar. But that raises the question, why give such a complex shape to a landmark? A simple mound could have served this function just as well. It's important to note that the snake mound has survived numerous natural processes. Rain, wind, and time have gradually altered the surface, but its overall appearance has remained virtually unchanged. This speaks to the skill of its builders. They understood the properties of the soil and knew how to strengthen the mound and ensure its stability. Today, the mound is a subject of study. Scientists continue to search for clues in its shape, orientation, and location. But many questions remain unanswered. Who exactly created the mound? What knowledge did the builders draw on? Why did they choose this particular symbol? And why was the mound so important that people invested so much effort into its construction? Ohio's Serpent Mound remains a quiet but powerful reminder that ancient peoples were able to express their ideas in forms that endure. It captivates with its mystery and grandeur, and until we uncover its full history, it will continue to inspire, provoke thought, and remind us that much of the past remains hidden beneath layers of time. Baalbek Terrace. The Baalbek Terrace is one of the most enigmatic structures of the ancient world. It stands on a hill where a huge temple complex once stood. But what attracts the most attention is the foundation of this complex. Several gigantic stone blocks lie there. They are so enormous that even modern technology would struggle to move them. The most famous blocks are called the Three Great Stones. Each weighs many hundreds of tons. Imagine a stone block over 10 meters long, about 3 meters high, and almost 4 meters wide. All of it, a single monolith. Nearby is another block, unfinished and partially lying in the quarry. It's even larger and heavier. Such dimensions astonish even modern engineers. The main question researchers are asking is, why did ancient craftsmen use such enormous stones? Small blocks are easier to quarry, easier to transport, and easier to fit together. But the builders chose a method of incredible complexity. Some believe the larger blocks created a more durable foundation. Others suggest the choice of enormous size was connected to tradition or a desire to demonstrate power. An equally important mystery is the processing methods. The blocks are made of stone that must be cut along a predetermined line. Separating a block required a tremendous amount of labor. Tool marks have been preserved in the quarry. They indicate that the craftsmen used hammers and stone and bronze tools. But even knowing this, it's difficult to imagine how long the process of creating such giants would have taken. Transporting the blocks is another complex issue. The quarry is nearby, but the distance is still considerable. Moving a block weighing hundreds of tons without wheels or metal mechanisms seems unthinkable. One theory suggests using wooden sleds and log pads. Such methods were sometimes used in ancient times, but many doubt they would have been able to handle such heavy loads. Another theory is that the blocks could have been transported overland, having first created special paths. Craftsmen could have smoothed the path, spraying it with water or vegetable oil to reduce friction. Such methods are known and have been used in various cultures. But this requires hundreds of workers, precise organization, and strong ropes made of durable materials. The placement of the blocks is a mystery in itself. They lie at a height on a carefully leveled foundation. This means they were either lifted or dragged upward. There is speculation about large earthen embankments. The builders could have constructed inclined ramps along which the blocks were gradually moved. Then, once the blocks were in the right place, the embankment was dismantled. This seems possible, but it would require a huge amount of resources. Interestingly, the blocks fit together so precisely, there's almost no space between them. If you bend down and try to see the gap, it's barely noticeable. This speaks to a high level of craftsmanship. The craftsmen understood how to work stone, how to smooth surfaces, and how to set the correct angle. But where they acquired such skills is also a mystery. The terrace itself served as the foundation for a large temple. Later, structures from various eras were erected on this site. Some parts were destroyed, others were rebuilt. But the enormous blocks remained. They are so massive that they have survived numerous wars, earthquakes, and reconstructions. Another interesting point is that the blocks are arranged in different layers. The largest ones are in one of the lower rows. This suggests that the builders started with the heaviest elements and then worked their way up, using smaller stones. This approach requires a clear plan and an understanding of how the weight is distributed. Despite numerous studies, the terrace remains a mystery. Scientists disagree about the methods used by the builders. Some believe it was the labor of thousands of people, their experience, and their patience. Others believe the craftsmen possessed knowledge we don't yet fully understand. There are even more unusual theories. Some believe the enormous blocks could have been used as earthquake insurance, as massive structures can withstand vibrations better. Others suggest the size of the blocks was a symbol of the ruler's power, who wanted to demonstrate their authority through impossible achievements. But despite the many theories, there is no definitive answer. This makes the Baalbek Terrace one of the most majestic and enigmatic structures of antiquity. Looking at these blocks, it's hard to believe they were created without machines, computers, or modern equipment. Each block is a silent witness to ancient craftsmanship that has never been fully uncovered. Until we learn all the details, the terrace will continue to delight and amaze. It reminds us that the ancient world was capable of creating wonders that baffle us even today. And perhaps one day a new discovery will provide the key to understanding what lies behind these gigantic stones. Easter Island writing. The Easter Island script, known as Rongorongo, remains one of the most mysterious writing systems in history. It is engraved on wooden tablets crafted by the inhabitants of the small, incredibly isolated island. The tablets are covered with neat rows of symbols that resemble drawings, symbols, and hieroglyphs all at once. But despite centuries of research, no one has fully understood what they mean. The writing's main feature is the unusual shape of the signs. The tablets depict figures of people, birds, fish, plants, and strange geometric shapes. They appear to be a sequence of images linked by a single logic. However, attempts to read them as direct text have so far been unsuccessful. The mystery begins with the fact that Rongorongo is the only known writing system created by such a remote people. Easter Island is located so far from major civilizations that outside influence seems unlikely. For this reason, scholars have long debated whether writing developed independently or whether the islanders were inspired by other cultures through their infrequent travels. But evidence for the latter possibility is scant. The tablets are traditionally read in a unique way. The lines do not run left to right or top to bottom. The writing is arranged so that the reader must turn the tablet after each line. This method is called rotary writing. This makes the system even more unique and challenging to learn. One of the main difficulties is that only a small number of tablets have survived. Many were destroyed during periods of social upheaval. Those that remain are severely damaged by time. The wood is fragile, and the symbols have been erased in places. Sometimes researchers can only see fragments of the signs, which complicates their work. It is believed that writing was used primarily by priests. Tablets may have been part of rituals associated with myths, genealogies, or rites. Writing then served not just a mundane function, but an important part of spiritual life. If so, many signs could have symbolized entire stories or complex concepts. Proponents of this theory believe that Ronggorhongo reflects the mythological world of the indigenous people. The tablets contain figures resembling sacred birds that existed only in legends. If the script truly describes myths, its structure may differ from the narrative logic we are accustomed to. This explains why the search for direct correspondences between the signs and sounds of the language has proven difficult. Another group of researchers believes that Ronggorhongo may not be a spoken script, but a set of symbols. Each sign may express not a sound, but an idea or an action. Reading the text, then, requires a deep understanding of the cultural contexts lost after the upheavals on the island. There's another complication. The language spoken by the tablet creators has changed. After contact with other cultures, some old words disappeared and speech changed. If the writing reflects an ancient form of language, then deciphering it requires reconstructing forgotten words and expressions. Despite this, there have been attempts to get closer to a solution. Some researchers have found repeating groups of symbols. There are suggestions that such sequences could represent important formulas, the names of rulers, or sacred stories. But for now, these are just speculations, as no theory has gained general acceptance. Interestingly, the locals preserved the memory of the tablets. They treated them with reverence, like relics. Elders said that the knowledge of reading was passed down from teacher to student, but after social upheaval and a change in power, this tradition was interrupted. As a result, writing remained, but the knowledge of it disappeared. Some believe that Ronggorhongo may have been created relatively late, but modeled on older systems. If so, the tablets represent an attempt to preserve a tradition that was already fading. In this case, some of the signs could have been imitations or incomplete reproductions of older symbols, making decipherment even more difficult. The content itself poses no less of a mystery. If Ronggorhongo describes myths, the text may contain metaphors, images, and hidden meanings. Such language is difficult to understand without a deep understanding of the culture. If it is a record of politics, genealogies, or rituals, then we are witnessing fragments of a history whose key has been lost. Today, Ronggorhongo is studied using digital methods. The tablets are digitized, three-dimensional models are created, and attempts are being made to find connections between repeating symbols. But even modern technology doesn't provide a complete answer. The writing remains a mystery, surrounded by many theories. The Easter Island script reminds us how easily an entire layer of knowledge can disappear if the tradition of transmission is interrupted. It preserves traces of a culture that managed to create its own symbolic language on a tiny island in a vast ocean. And until the keys to its decipherment are found, Ronggorhongo remains one of humanity's most silent yet profound mysteries. Nan Madol. Nan Madol is one of the most unusual ancient cities built not on land, but directly on the water. It is located on the coast of an island where dozens of artificial islets are connected by canals and stone platforms. Looking down on it from above, it seems as if you are looking at a stone network woven with astonishing precision. But the main mystery of Nan Madol lies not in its beauty, but in how and why it was created. The city is composed of enormous basalt blocks. These blocks resemble enormous stone logs. They have straight edges, smooth surfaces, and are shaped as if they were specially selected to be stacked like giant beams. The most astonishing aspect is the weight of each block. Some reach sizes that are difficult to move, even with modern machinery. How ancient builders managed to quarry such stones remains a mystery. Basalt is a hard rock formed by the cooling of lava. In nature, it often takes the form of long hexagonal pillars. Perhaps the builders used ready-made molds found in the rocks. But even so, quarrying and transporting such heavy blocks requires incredible strength and skill. Even more mysterious is how the blocks were transported to the construction site. Nan Madol is located in shallow water, and the stones had to be transported by water. One theory suggests that the builders used rafts. However, given the weight of the enormous blocks, it becomes clear that this would have been a complex and risky process. Others believe the stones were moved by special devices, possibly a combination of buoyancy and levers. It's also unknown how the blocks were placed on top of each other. The city was built so that each block fits perfectly into the overall pattern. They form walls, platforms, foundations, and even peculiar corridors. Moreover, the masonry is so smooth that it seems as if the builders possessed precise geometrical knowledge. The purpose of Nan Madol also raises questions. Some researchers believe the city served as a center of power for local rulers. Ceremonies were held here, relics were kept, and important decisions were made. The artificial islands could have served as homes, temples, and storage facilities. It is believed that Nan Madol was a site of spiritual practices. Traces of ritual objects have been found on some of the islets. Perhaps the city was a sacred center where no one could enter without permission. If so, its construction was meant to symbolize the connection between people and spirits. Another theory suggests that the city may have served a defensive purpose. The canals separating the islets form a complex network, making navigation difficult without precise directions. This may have served as protection against enemies who would be unable to quickly reach the city center. It's also interesting that Nan Madol was abandoned. It gradually sank beneath the waves, and its walls began to crumble. The reasons for this abandonment are unknown. Perhaps the climate changed, sea levels rose, or political structures shifted. But the fact remains. The city, so painstakingly built, was abandoned. Today, Nan Madol fascinates explorers and travelers. People often call it the Atlantis of the Pacific. It combines elements of grandeur and silence. Each stone structure recalls the masters who possessed knowledge lost over many generations. Research continues, but answers are still few. The city remains an example of how ancient peoples were capable of creating structures that seem impossible even today. Nan Madol is history frozen in stone. It holds a secret hidden not only in its construction, but also in the people who lived here, worshipped spirits, built unusual homes, and saw the world differently than we do. Until the city's history is fully revealed, it remains one of the most enigmatic monuments to ancient civilizations whose lives and wisdom remain buried beneath water and time. Mapimi Silent Zone. The Zone of Silence, located in the desert region of Mapimi in northern Mexico, is one of those mysteries that seems simultaneously scientific and mystical. It's known as a space where technology behaves strangely, compasses go awry, and radios stop working. People come here hoping to witness unusual phenomena or sense the mysterious power of the earth. But the more researchers study the area, the more questions arise. The main characteristic of the Zone of Silence is signal disruptions. Travelers report that radios stop working, mobile devices lose signal, and compasses show incorrect directions. Sometimes technology malfunctions. The signal appears and disappears intermittently. This creates the feeling that something in the surrounding space is violating the usual laws of space. Another mystery is animal behavior. Some locals claim to encounter species here that are difficult to find in other regions. Birds fly unusual routes, and reptiles behave strangely. They climb onto heated rocks and remain motionless longer than usual. Such stories are passed down from generation to generation, creating an aura of mystery around these desert plains. Oddities associated with the zone began to be noticed many decades ago. The first researchers attempting to study the area using radio devices were surprised by the signals in certain areas seemingly vanishing into thin air. Later, the name Zone of Silence emerged, emphasizing the location's uniqueness. One of the most talked about events occurred in the mid-20th century when a research object sent by a scientific laboratory fell into the region. It veered off course and ended up in the zone of silence. This incident attracted the attention of scientists who came to retrieve the fallen equipment. Many claim that it was after this incident that the legend of the region's mysterious properties began to grow most rapidly. Scientists have attempted to rationalize the phenomenon. One theory suggests that the region's soil contains rare metals and minerals. These can influence the magnetic field, creating localized characteristics. If the magnetic field is uneven, compasses may malfunction. Indeed, some areas of the desert are characterized by elevated levels of metallic compounds. But this explanation only explains part of the oddities. Why then is radio communication disrupted? Why does the signal disappear completely at some points, as if hitting an invisible wall? Scientists suggest that a special combination of rocks may be the cause. In some places, the Earth contains layers that reflect radio waves, and the signal may be scattered or deflected. But the question remains, why are such phenomena so localized? Why do they occur here in what appears to be an ordinary desert? There's a theory that an old meteorite or ancient metallic rock cluster exists in the zone of silence, influencing magnetic processes. This theory is supported by the presence of unusual rocks discovered by researchers. Some of them contain rare compounds that could indeed influence the surrounding space. However, definitive confirmation is still lacking. There's also a legendary interpretation. People tell of strange lights appearing over the desert at night. These lights move slowly or hover in one place. Sometimes they flash suddenly, illuminating the ground. These stories are passed down from those who lived here before the advent of technology, which deepens the mystery. Some travelers claim to have seen figures disappearing into dusty swirls. Others describe a feeling of being watched. While such stories are difficult to prove, they create an air of mysticism that makes the zone of silence a destination for mystery lovers. Researchers who have visited here over the years note that the feeling in the desert is truly unusual. The combination of silence, vast space, and strange technical glitches creates a sense of isolation. Even seasoned specialists admit that being here at night is a unique experience. There are also hypotheses related to geography. It is believed that the region may lie on the boundary of invisible energy lines of the Earth, sometimes called lines of force. Although such ideas are more often attributed to spirituality, some places are indeed ascribed special properties related to geological features. The zone of silence remains a subject of study. Scientists are measuring magnetic fields, analyzing soil composition, and testing radio signals. More data is being collected each year, but there are no definitive answers. Perhaps the phenomenon is explained by a combination of natural factors, minerals, topography, and magnetic properties. But there are also details that still defy rational explanation. This place blends science and legend. Some come here to measure the field and collect samples. Others come to soak up the mysterious atmosphere. And everyone leaves with their own impression. Some speak of a strange silence, others of nightlights, still others of the strange behavior of equipment. The Mapimi zone of silence remains one of nature's most intriguing mysteries. It reminds us that the Earth holds secrets that aren't always immediately revealed. And as long as researchers continue to explore it, the dusty desert will retain its strange sounds, lights, and silence that stirs the imagination. Yeti is a legend of the high mountains. The Yeti is one of the most famous and, at the same time, most mysterious figures in world mythology. It is known as the abominable snowman, the spirit of the mountains, and the mystical guardian of the northern peaks. Stories about it are told by many peoples living in the mountains of Asia. People claim to have encountered a huge, furry creature that moved across the snow as confidently as if it had been born among the icy cliffs. But despite the vast number of stories, no one has yet come up with a definitive answer as to who or what the Yeti is. The main characteristic of the descriptions is the creature's height and build. Eyewitnesses describe a figure much taller than a human. The legs are powerful and wide, the arms are long, and the movements are confident, almost silent. The fur is usually described as gray or brown, and the eyes as dark and watchful. But what particularly surprises people are the tracks. Enormous prints resembling human ones, but significantly larger, have been found on snowy slopes many times. The tracks often form a long trail, leading to places where a human would barely be able to pass. Some of the most famous accounts come from climbers who have ascended the high peaks of the Himalayas. Some have seen silhouettes moving between the rocks. Others have heard strange sounds at night, like low screams or roars. For many, these were the most frightening moments of their lives, because at night in the mountains, any sound takes on a special power. Scientists have attempted to rationalize the phenomenon. One theory suggests that the Yeti may be a rare species of bear. Bears that can stand on their hind legs and walk short distances do indeed exist in the eastern regions. But this theory doesn't explain the human-like shape of the tracks found by hundreds of people. Another theory suggests the remnants of ancient species. Perhaps somewhere in the highlands, a species of large primate survived, existing in small numbers. These animals may have avoided humans, hiding and emerging only at night. But if this were the case, remains or other traces of their existence should have been found. So far, there is no such evidence. There are also folk theories. Locals in the Himalayas have spoken of mountain spirits for thousands of years. According to them, the Yeti is more than just an animal. It is a creature connected to the spirit world. It appears only before important events and can warn or protect travelers. Sometimes it is considered the guardian of forests and snow. This interpretation makes the Yeti part of spiritual culture, not a biological mystery. But many sightings were too detailed to be dismissed as mere legend. For example, a group of travelers once discovered a trail of tracks hundreds of meters long. Each track was deeply pressed into the snow, indicating the creature's considerable weight. The snow was fresh, and the tracks couldn't have been more than a few hours old. There were no traces of bears, wolves, or humans nearby. Some researchers have attempted to collect hair samples found on trees or rocks. Analysis of these samples has yielded mixed results. In some cases, the hair belonged to ordinary animals. In others, the characteristics were so unusual that scientists could not determine the exact origin. However, to date, no sample has been found that can be considered definitive proof of the existence of Bigfoot. Yetis are often associated with regional conditions. High mountains are little studied. People rarely climb to the places where Yeti legends are most common. Eternal snows and impassable gorges may conceal animals unknown to us. But the question remains, if the Yeti exists, why are they so rarely seen? It is believed that the creature is nocturnal. During the day, it hides in deep caves or under rock overhangs. At night, it emerges in search of food, moving quickly and cautiously. The deserted highlands provide ideal conditions for stealth. Some researchers speculate that the Yeti may not be a single creature, but a whole group of rare animals. However, their numbers are so small that encountering them is almost impossible. This explains why no remains have been found. High-altitude conditions can conceal traces for centuries. This mystery remains alive thanks to eyewitness accounts. People who have reported encounters with the Yeti have described not only fear, but also a strange sense of the presence of something unusual, as if they had encountered creatures that shouldn't exist. The Yeti remains a part of global culture. It appears in books, legends, and expeditions. But behind all this lies a real question. Could a large animal exist in the world that has so far eluded proof? There's no definitive answer yet, but it's precisely this lack of a complete answer that makes the Yeti one of the most captivating mysteries. It straddles the line between myth and reality, reminding us that nature still holds secrets we haven't fully grasped. And perhaps somewhere among the icy slopes, a massive creature roams, leaving tracks that fade with the morning sun. Lights of Hessdalen. The Hessdalen lights are one of the most mysterious light phenomena on the planet. In a narrow Norwegian valley surrounded by steep slopes, luminous objects regularly appear. They move across the sky, hang motionless, or flash briefly, illuminating the rocks and snow. This phenomenon has been going on for decades, and each generation of residents tells its own stories. But there is still no definitive explanation for what causes these astonishing lights. The main characteristic of the phenomenon is its unpredictability. Sometimes the lights appear several times a night, while others disappear for weeks. They come in a variety of colors: white, yellow, red, and bluish. Some flash for only a second, while others can hover over the valley for several minutes. The most astonishing thing is the movement of the lights. Some slowly glide along the slopes, while others change direction so abruptly that they seem to defy the normal laws of motion. People began observing lights long before the advent of modern instruments. Local residents reported strange lights appearing on winter evenings when the air becomes particularly cold and the sky is crystal clear. These stories were long considered mere legends. But by the end of the 20th century, sightings became so frequent that researchers decided to study the phenomenon seriously. Scientists installed cameras, magnetic field measuring devices, and long-exposure cameras. The images revealed luminous streaks, dots, and spherical shapes. These images confirmed that the lights were not a figment of the imagination. They exist and possess properties difficult to explain by ordinary natural phenomena. One of the first theories involves atmospheric discharges. In some areas of the Earth, unusual forms of electrical glow are found, such as spherical structures or plasma formations. It's possible that the Hessdalen lights are a special form of atmospheric electricity. However, the problem is that the lights appear in calm weather when there are no thunderstorms, lightning, or strong winds. Atmospheric discharges are usually short-lived, whereas the lights here can glow for a long time. Another theory involves chemical reactions. The valley contains minerals containing metals. If particles of these minerals rise into the air and the humidity and temperature are just right, a glow can occur. Some scientists believe the valley possesses rare conditions that create the effect of natural lamps. However, this theory only explains part of the observations. It doesn't explain the rapid movements of the lights or their complex trajectories. It is believed that the lights may be related to geological activity. The ground beneath the valley contains rocks that, when subjected to friction or pressure, can generate electrical charges. If these charges accumulate and are released, they can create bright flashes. Some researchers attribute this to plate movement or underground processes. However, there is no significant seismic activity in the Hessdalen area, making this hypothesis controversial. Another theory involves the interaction of atmospheric particles and electromagnetic lines. In some places on the planet, such interactions create unusual light effects. However, the Hessdalen phenomenon is too localized and persistent. It occurs specifically in a narrow valley and not throughout the entire surrounding area, which raises additional questions. Descriptions of lights moving against the wind or hovering in one spot are particularly noteworthy. Some observers described lights that seemed intelligent. They changed direction when people appeared nearby or hovered as if exploring the surrounding area. Such accounts are often perceived as subjective, but they are repeated in various sources. Proponents of these unusual theories believe the lights may be a manifestation of a natural phenomenon still unknown to science. Perhaps it's a special form of plasma or a particle interaction we haven't yet studied. Sometimes nature creates phenomena that remain long unexplained, just as the northern lights once remained a mystery. Some believe the lights may be related to observations that people refer to as unexplained objects. However, scientific researchers try to avoid such assumptions and seek explanations within known processes. The shape of the lights plays an important role in studying them. Sometimes they appear as spherical balls of light. Other times they resemble elongated droplets that move vertically or horizontally. There are even rare observations where the lights appear to split in two or change color while moving. This makes studying the phenomenon even more challenging. Locals treat the lights calmly. For them, they're a part of nature, like snow, rain, or the northern lights. Some tell stories of seeing the lights for the first time as children. They describe bright flashes falling from the sky or rising from the slopes. But no one considers the lights dangerous. Rather, they evoke respect and a touch of awe. Researchers have set up special observation posts that continue to record the lights to this day. Scientific teams visit every few years to check the equipment, collect data, and compare results. Despite dozens of recordings, there is no definitive explanation. Some attempts to reproduce the lights in the laboratory have yielded hints, but not exact copies. For example, experiments with plasma or chemical reactions have shown similar effects, but not exact matches. This suggests that the Hess-Dahlen lights may be a complex phenomenon, combining several factors simultaneously. It is also believed that the valley's unique shape plays a significant role. The slopes can create conditions conducive to the concentration of atmospheric particles, which, under certain conditions, become visible. At the same time, the valley can serve as a kind of corridor where electrical charges accumulate and are released. This explains the local nature of the phenomenon. The Hess-Dahlen lights remain one of those mysteries that continue to amaze even after decades of research. They are not only scientifically interesting, but also aesthetically pleasing. The flames emerging from the darkness create a sense of ancient wonder. It seems as if nature is speaking to us, revealing its hidden processes. The phenomenon reminds us that the Earth holds many secrets, even in the age of technology. And as long as the lights continue to appear in the valley, they attract people who want to witness the miracle with their own eyes. Each observer becomes part of a story that stretches for many decades and remains unresolved. The Hess-Dahlen lights are a light in the mountains that no one can fully explain. They are a reminder that the world remains mysterious and wondrous, even when we think we've explored everything. And it's precisely because of phenomena like these that we continue to gaze at the sky with the same sense of awe that people felt thousands of years ago. The disappearance of the Mayan civilization. The disappearance of the great Mayan civilization remains one of the most debated mysteries. These peoples created cities of astonishing size and beauty. They built temples decorated with carvings, created complex calendars, and observed the movements of the heavens. But many centuries after their heyday, their vast cities became almost completely deserted. The mystery for us isn't just the disappearance itself, but also how quickly it happened. Some cities emptied gradually, while others seemed abandoned suddenly. This seems odd, given that the Maya were adaptable to a variety of conditions, practiced agriculture, and had strong trade links. One of the first theories centers on climate change. Scientists suggest that prolonged droughts may have occurred in the Maya region. Such cycles sometimes recur in tropical regions. If a drought lasted for many years, harvests declined, and the populations of large cities began to experience hardship. But this theory only explains part of the phenomenon. Other researchers believe that overpopulation played a major role. Mayan cities grew rapidly, requiring vast areas for cultivation to support them. When the population reached the limits of the land's capacity, conflicts over resources arose. This situation could have led to wars between rulers, the weakening of the cities, and their gradual decline. It's believed that in some areas the soil became depleted over time. People cleared forests to make way for fields, and these fields subsequently lost their fertility. To feed the inhabitants, new territories had to be developed. This forced people to move further and further, and old cities lost their importance. Political instability could also have played a significant role. The Maya consisted of numerous independent city-states. They often feuded. This competition led to prolonged wars. Over time, the cities weakened. If an enemy destroyed important temples or roads, the city lost its power and the inhabitants left. But there are even more puzzling aspects. In some places, archaeologists have found signs of sudden departure. People didn't destroy their homes, they simply abandoned them. Why didn't they return? What made them abandon everything so quickly? There are no answers. Some Mayan legends speak of the gods abandoning the people. This may reflect real events that the people of the time could not explain. For example, a combination of drought, disease, and crop failure could have been perceived as a sign. Then the inhabitants might have believed they needed to leave the unfortunate place and seek a new land. There's also a theory about disease. Outbreaks of severe infections sometimes occur in the tropics. If the disease was new to the population, it could have led to mass deaths. But there's insufficient evidence for this theory. Interestingly, the disappearance occurred not in one place, but over a vast territory. The Maya inhabited vast lands, including dense forests and high plateaus. The disappearance of the cities occurred gradually and unevenly. Some centers were abandoned in one period, others several centuries later. This deepens the mystery. There are also some unusual theories. Some researchers believe the Maya may have changed their way of life. Instead of large cities, they may have moved to smaller settlements. Descendants of the Maya still live in the forests, leading a modest but sustainable lifestyle. Perhaps their ancestors realized that large cities had become a burden. But then the question arises, why did the very tradition of building enormous temples and monuments disappear? This points to profound changes in society. Perhaps faith in the previous rulers collapsed. Rulers often linked their power to rituals and astronomy. If rituals ceased to function, the population might have abandoned the old system. Some Mayan villages survived the decline of the great cities. They continued to live their lives, develop, and preserve their traditions. This suggests that their disappearance was not the end of a people, but rather the end of enormous political centers. Nevertheless, the question of why one of the most advanced civilizations of the time abandoned its great cities remains open. The more closely archaeologists study these territories, the more complex the picture becomes. It doesn't seem like there was a single cause for the disappearance. Rather, it was likely a chain of events. Droughts, overpopulation, conflicts, disease, political intrigue, all of these could have been compounded. It's important to remember that we're seeing the results many centuries later. Ancient structures have been destroyed by forests and time. Many Mayan records have been lost. What we know is only part of a vast history. And each new excavation adds a piece to this mosaic, but doesn't always make the picture clearer. The disappearance of the Mayan civilization remains a lesson in how even advanced societies can face challenges beyond their capabilities. It is a reminder of the fragility of large systems. And simultaneously, it is evidence of how nature and humans are intertwined in complex processes that cannot be explained by a single factor. While the mystery remains unsolved, it continues to inspire researchers to seek new answers, and every step toward understanding this enigma reveals not only the Mayan past, but also ourselves. Bolivian fortress of Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman is one of the most incredible stone structures in South America. Standing on a hill above the ancient city, it appears so powerful and monumental, as if crafted not by humans, but by giants. The enormous walls, assembled from multi-ton stone blocks, fit together perfectly without a single drop of mortar. Their joints are so precise that even a thin sheet of paper cannot be squeezed between the stones. It is this extraordinary precision that has given rise to numerous legends and scholarly debates. The fortress's main mystery is its stonework. Some blocks reach several meters in height and weigh tens of tons. They have a complex polygonal shape, and each face fits so skillfully with the adjacent block that it seems as if the stones have grown into one another. Moreover, the shape of each stone is unique. No two are alike. This makes the masonry resemble a gigantic puzzle, crafted by the hands of incredible craftsmen. The question of how the builders lifted such blocks remains one of the most controversial. The peoples who lived here had no wheeled carts, steel tools, or machinery. It is believed they used ropes, levers, and smooth ramps, but even with these, moving multi-ton blocks up steep slopes is extremely difficult. Nevertheless, the walls stand, and every detail of the masonry demonstrates a high level of craftsmanship. What's also interesting is that the stones show no signs of rough workmanship. The edges are even, the surface is smooth, and the corners are cut with extreme precision. This suggests that the builders mastered techniques that allowed for precise cuts and created complex shapes as if they were working with a soft material rather than hard rock. How they managed this remains a mystery. Some researchers believe the stones were shaped by the impact of stone tools, patience, and time. This prolonged polishing process could have allowed the shapes to be gradually refined. But even if this is true, how did the craftsmen achieve such a perfect fit? There are no gaps between them, and the joint lines are sometimes curved, as if the seams were deliberately created to strengthen the structure. Sacsayhuaman has more than just walls. Inside the complex are terraces, platforms, stairs, and level areas, likely used for ceremonies. It is believed that the fortress served not only as a defensive structure, but also as a sacred site. Festivals, rituals, gatherings, and possibly astronomical observations were held here. The enormous crenellated walls are particularly striking. They are arranged in several lines resembling massive stone waves. This design is not only beautiful, but also practical. If an enemy attempted to scale the walls, they would find themselves confronted by fractures that hindered their attack. The fortress was protected by natural terrain and ingenious fortifications, making it nearly impregnable. It is believed that Sacsayhuaman may have been part of a larger complex associated with the religious life of the people. Tunnels, underground passages, and special stone structures used in rituals have been found within. Some stone surfaces contain depressions and channels through which water could flow. This suggests a connection with the symbolism of purification or the worship of natural forces. However, why the stonework is so perfect remains a mystery. If the primary goal was to build a fortress, smaller blocks could have been used and laid more quickly. But the builders chose the path of incredible precision. Such attention to detail is usually associated with a ritual function. Another interesting point is the evidence of possible earthquakes. The region is prone to seismic activity, but the walls of Sacsayhuaman have withstood numerous tremors. The perfectly aligned stones and their polygonal shape make the structure flexible. It flexes during earthquakes without collapsing. This further suggests that the builders understood the region's unique characteristics and designed the buildings to last for centuries. Some researchers speculate that the builders used knowledge that is now lost. They may have known specialized stoneworking techniques or used a combination of fire, water, and pressure to make the material more malleable. However, there is no definitive evidence of such technologies. There are also legends. Locals said the stones could move on their own, driven by the sounds of special pipes. This is, of course, a myth, but it captures the general impression. The stonework looks not like the result of brute force, but like the work of an invisible mechanism. Science explains the fortress in terms of the skill and experience of the builders. However, even the most rational explanations leave a sense of wonder. Why were the walls constructed from such enormous blocks? Why was each facet fitted with such precision? Why do some stones have up to 12 facets, each perfectly aligned with its neighbors? Sacsayhuaman remains a living mystery. It combines the skill of ancient builders, the unique landscape, the power of stone, and the grandeur of a culture that lived many centuries ago. Every stone here seems to speak of a past we only partially understand. And until definitive answers are found, the fortress continues to fascinate and make us reflect on the depth of knowledge of those who built it. Fire spheres of the Mekong. The Mekong fireballs are a rare and spectacular phenomenon that annually captivates residents of Thailand and Laos. On a specific evening in the fall, bright fireballs begin to rise above the Mekong River. They flare up directly from the water, rise several dozen meters into the air, and then vanish, seemingly dissolving into thin air. Hundreds of people gather on the banks to witness this unusual rebirth of light, an event that each time evokes emotion, wonder, and a host of questions. The main characteristic of the fire spheres is their unpredictability and simultaneity. In some places, dozens of fireballs rise above the river, in others, just a few. They come in various sizes, from tiny sparks resembling red beads to large ones the size of a human palm. Their color typically ranges from reddish to bright orange. But the strangest thing is that they leave no smoke traces, produce no odor, and make no sound. Locals call this phenomenon Phai Nak, the fire of the Naga. According to ancient legends, the glowing balls are the breath or message of a mythical Naga serpent living in the depths of the Mekong. In the traditions of these peoples, Nagas are supernatural beings who guard the waters. For them, the fireballs are a sign of blessing and spiritual presence. The phenomenon is difficult to explain scientifically. The most common explanation is gas ignition. In some marshy regions, especially those rich in organic sediments, gases such as methane can form. If such gases rise from the depths of the river to the surface and ignite, they can create a fireball effect. However, this raises several questions. First, why does the fire flare up without a visible ignition source? Methane requires a spark or high temperature to ignite. Second, why are the balls moving so straight upward? If it were a gas flare, it would spread more chaotically, rather than rising in a straight vertical line. Some researchers believe that rare atmospheric conditions may be the cause. At certain humidity and temperature, plasma balls, natural fires similar to ball lightning, can form. However, ball lightning is extremely rare and has an unpredictable shape and behavior. The Mekong fireballs, on the other hand, appear with surprising regularity, almost every year, at the same time. One theory involves chemical reactions underwater. The river may contain special bacteria that emit gases capable of briefly flammability. However, scientific research has yet to find a biological mechanism that would accurately account for the phenomenon. Some experts speculate that the flashes of light may be optical illusions, reflections of lights from the shore, or light refracted in the lower atmosphere. However, residents of the region who have observed the spheres for centuries claim that the orbs rise from the water, not reflect from above. Numerous videos also confirm that the light is coming from below. Another hypothesis is atmospheric electrification. Sometimes water can accumulate electrical charges, which are released as flashes of light. However, such phenomena are usually accompanied by sound or traces on the water. Fire spheres, on the other hand, are silent and leave no vibrations on the river's surface. Interestingly, the number of spheres varies from year to year. Sometimes there are dozens or hundreds, sometimes just a few. This suggests that there are variable conditions that determine their appearance. This could be related to water levels, river temperature, the activity of underwater springs, or chemical reactions. But science is not yet able to pinpoint a specific factor. Locals view the phenomenon as part of a cultural tradition. In the evening, when the fireballs are expected to appear, a celebration is held on the shores. Families gather, cook food, and light candles and lanterns. A sense of anticipation permeates the air. And when the first fireball erupts from the water and rises smoothly into the air, the crowd greets it with delight. But despite the festive atmosphere, many continue to wonder, what exactly is this phenomenon? Is it a natural phenomenon we don't yet fully understand, or a rare combination of factors that only occurs in this river? Or does the ancient legend of the Naga contain a grain of truth in symbolic form? The Mekong fire spheres remain one of nature's most astonishing mysteries. They combine legend and science, myth and observation, ancient beliefs and modern video footage. This phenomenon reminds us that even ordinary places can host events that leave people wondering. And while scientists continue to study the nature of these fireballs, the Mekong once again becomes a river of light every autumn, a place where an invisible force revives the water and raises shining, fiery messages above it. Roang Roang. The underground city of Derinkiu is one of the most enigmatic architectural masterpieces of the ancient world. Imagine, deep underground, an entire multi-level city is hidden, descending tens of meters. Tunnels, passages, rooms, ventilation shafts, food storage areas, wells, all crafted by hand, and all of it existed long before the advent of modern tools. Derinkiu looks as if it wasn't carved by humans, but rather the earth itself revealed its secret passages. The city's main feature is its depth. It extends underground on several levels, connected by narrow passages. Some corridors are so narrow that only one person can fit through them. At the same time, the city has a clear structure. Each level has its own rooms, functions, and spaces for gatherings and relaxation. The very idea of creating such a vast underground space seems incredible. It would have required knowledge of the rock's properties, the ability to reinforce the walls, and the ability to provide ventilation, and all this without metal tools, machines, or complex mechanisms. But the ancients managed it so skillfully that many of the corridors still stand today. One of the main mysteries of Derinkiu is how it was built. The rock in this region is softer than ordinary stone, making it easier to work with. But even soft rock requires precision. One misstep and the ceiling could collapse. But the builders clearly understood the structure of the earth. They designed the rooms so that the walls remained strong, leaving thick lintels, expanding the spaces gradually, and testing their stability. The ventilation system is also interesting. The city has deep vertical shafts that extend throughout Derinkiu. They allow air to pass through, allowing people to breathe even at the deepest levels. Even today, creating such a system would be difficult. But the ancient craftsmen managed to design it so meticulously that air circulates naturally. There's a theory that several thousand people may have lived in the city. Rooms found on various levels could have been kitchens, workshops, storage facilities, wineries, and even schools. But if people really did live here permanently, the question arises, why? Why hide underground? One popular theory suggests that the city served as a refuge. In ancient times, wars, raids, and danger were part of life. People could hide underground for weeks, safely waiting out invaders. This explains the presence of enormous stone doors that could be used to block passages. These doors weighed hundreds of kilograms and rotated around a central axis. They could be moved by several people, but they were impossible to open from the outside. Another theory is related to the climate. In the hot underground region, the temperature remains constant. Therefore, Derinkiu may have been created as a place where people could live comfortably during periods of extreme heat or cold. But then, it's unclear why the city was built so deep. There's also a spiritual theory. Some researchers believe the underground levels could have symbolized the soul's journey to another world. Perhaps the city was used not only for living, but also for rituals associated with transition, purification, or education. But one of the boldest hypotheses suggests that the city may have been part of a vast network of underground tunnels. Numerous underground cities do indeed exist in the region, some of them connected by tunnels. This creates the impression that ancient people built entire underground kingdoms. Why? Perhaps because of a perceived threat or religious beliefs. But there is no clear answer. It's also interesting that many of the rooms show traces of fire. This suggests that people used torches or oil lamps to illuminate the tunnels. But in some places, the walls are so smooth that it seems as if the lighting was much better. This raises questions. How could the craftsmen carve such precise shapes in such dim light? What's also surprising is how long the city remained a secret. It was discovered by accident. A local resident was attempting to expand his home and accidentally broke through a wall, revealing an ancient passageway. It soon became clear that it led to a vast, multi-level complex. Today, Derinkachu is open to visitors, although many levels remain closed or unexplored. Scientists continue to study the city, discovering new details, but each discovery raises new questions. Why were underground shelters built here? How did people organize their lives at such depths? Why was the city abandoned? What happened to the civilization that was able to build such an unusual shelter? Derinkachu remains one of the deepest and most enigmatic mysteries of antiquity. It reminds us that our ancestors were not only craftsmen, but also thinkers, capable of creating complex systems in conditions that seem impossible to us. And while the underground levels retain their secret corridors and empty rooms, Derinkachu remains a mystery that continues to attract researchers from around the world. Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are among the most impressive and enigmatic works of ancient humanity. These enormous drawings stretch across many kilometers of desert surface. From above, they form figures of animals, plants, people, and geometric lines of such precision that it seems as if they were drawn with a giant compass. Anyone who sees them for the first time wonders, how were people who lived many centuries ago able to create such things without taking to the air? The main feature of the lines is their scale. Some designs reach hundreds of meters. There are figures of a hummingbird, a monkey, a spider, a flower, a man with enormous eyes, and even lines that stretch for tens of kilometers in a strictly straight line, without the slightest deviation. And all of this was created on the surface of a rocky desert, where rain is almost non-existent and winds do not erode the contours. Thanks to this, the lines have survived to this day in near-perfect condition. But how were they made? The ancient inhabitants removed dark stones from the surface, revealing the lighter soil beneath. This simple action created the contrast that makes the drawings visible from above. However, another mystery arises. How can the lines be maintained when you're standing on the ground and can't see the entire drawing? One theory suggests that the line creators used wooden pegs and taut ropes. This method allows for the creation of straight lines and proportions. This explains geometric shapes such as trapezoids, arrows, rays, and straight paths. But animals and people are much more complex. Some figures contain curves and proportions that are difficult to discern without a panoramic view. It is believed that artists created scale models of their designs on the ground and then scaled them up to the required size using a grid. This method was indeed known in ancient cultures, and it may have allowed craftsmen to maintain the correct proportions. But even with this approach, the overall work required incredible precision and consistency. The purpose of the lines remains a matter of debate. Some researchers believe they were giant open-air temples. The path along the lines may have been part of a ritual. People walked along them to pray to the gods of rain and fertility. This theory is supported by the fact that some figures are associated with water, a rare and precious resource in the desert region. Others believe the lines may have served as astronomical instruments. Many straight lines align with sunrise and sunset on specific days. Some figures are oriented toward the cardinal points. Others align with the directions of certain stars. Perhaps this wasn't a complex device, but a sacred calendar, helping people navigate the changing seasons. Some geoglyphs resemble paths. The wide, straight lines may have served as pathways for ritual processions. People walked along them, invoking the heavenly powers, and the figures they crossed symbolize spirits or natural objects. There are theories related to water. Although the Nazca Desert appears dry, ancient water channels exist underground. Some lines run parallel to these channels or intersect points where water rises closer to the surface. Perhaps the geoglyphs were a kind of map, helping people find water. But the question remains, why make a map so huge that it's only visible from above? Some believe the Nazca inhabitants may have flown kites or built simple towers to allow partial views of the designs from above. But there's little evidence for this. The animals are a great mystery. Why spend so much time creating a giant spider or monkey? It suggested that each figure symbolized a specific force of nature. The spider symbolized rain, the hummingbird symbolized the sun, and the monkey symbolized fertility. If the lines were part of rituals, then the figures served as signposts for spirits. People may have believed that by creating such images, they were connecting with the invisible world. Some figures are so far apart from each other that it creates the impression that this is not a single complex, but a multitude of sacred places united by a common tradition. What's also interesting is that the lines were created over several generations. People returned to the desert again and again, maintaining the lines and adding new ones. This suggests that the geoglyphs were an important part of the culture, passed on to children as a reminder of their ancestors and a connection to nature. Despite all this research, many questions remain unanswered. How exactly were the locations for each figure chosen? How were the proportions determined? Were the geoglyphs part of a unified plan, or were they created as needed? And why did the Nazca Desert become a sacred site for this ancient people? The Nazca lines are more than just drawings. They are traces of the thought, faith, and skill of people who lived in harsh conditions and yet managed to create one of the most astonishing cultural mysteries. Looking at the figures from above, you get the feeling of looking at a vast book inscribed with the history of a people, but written in symbols whose meaning we cannot yet fully understand. And while the desert continues to preserve these drawings under the scorching sun, the Nazca lines remain one of the most fascinating and untold mysteries that connect the past and the present in one infinite space. Stonehenge. Stonehenge is one of the most recognizable stone structures in the world, yet one of the most mysterious. The enormous blocks, arranged in a circle on a plain, look as if someone wanted to leave a mark that would be visible for millennia. People come here to feel the breath of the past, but the mystery of its purpose remains unsolved. Stonehenge's defining feature is its combination of simplicity of form and complexity of design. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a circle of enormous stones. But a closer look reveals the carefully planned arrangement of the blocks. The stones are aligned with the sun's path, and some form unique gateways through which sunlight passes on special days. The structure consists of several circles. The outer circle is composed of enormous vertical stones, on top of which horizontal slabs are laid. This construction requires skill, as each stone had to be precisely positioned, and many weigh tens of tons. Inside are smaller stones made from rock, transported from great distances. This puzzles researchers. Why would people transport such heavy blocks tens of kilometers if local stones were available nearby? This suggests the material had a special significance. Perhaps it was considered sacred or used in rituals. One of the most intriguing mysteries concerns how the builders moved the stones. Without wheels, without metal tools, without heavy draft animals, the process seems incredible. But some believe the stones were pulled on wooden sleds, using logs as a support. This required the coordinated work of dozens of people and considerable experience. There's also a theory that the stones traveled part of the way by water. There are rivers in the region that could have carried wooden rafts loaded with stone blocks. When the rivers flooded, this made the process easier. This theory makes transportation more feasible, but it still required a tremendous amount of effort. The purpose of Stonehenge remains the subject of much speculation. One of the most common ideas is astronomical function. The structure is oriented according to the sun's directions. On special days of the year, the summer solstice and the winter solstice, the sun's rays pass through certain openings as if intentionally designed. This may have served as a calendar, helping to determine important periods. But the calendar-only explanation seems too simplistic. Stonehenge was clearly an important site. Rituals related to life and death may have taken place there. Burials and traces of ancient settlements have been found near the complex. This suggests the region was an important center. People came here to participate in ceremonies or celebrate important events. Another theory suggests that the stones had medicinal properties. Some slabs are considered special and could be used in healing rituals. People believed that certain stones possessed powers, especially if they were brought from afar. However, there is little evidence to support this theory. What's also interesting is that Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It was constructed in several stages, each taking many years. This suggests the complex held significance for many generations. People continued to work on it, modify it, enhance it, and add to it. Despite the enormous amount of research, much remains unknown. The builders left no written records. All we know are stone remains, traces of excavation, and finds in the surrounding area. Based on this data, scientists are trying to reconstruct the story, but many aspects remain unclear. Stonehenge continues to retain an aura of mystery. Just observing the arrangement of the stones, one can imagine how ancient people gathered here at night or at dawn, greeting the sun, invoking the gods, or marking the passing of time. This place seems to unite the world of the living and the world of spirits. Many legends surround Stonehenge. Some associate it with magicians, others with kings. Although difficult to take literally, they convey a sense of power and antiquity that emanated from these stones. Today, Stonehenge is more than just an archaeological site. It symbolizes a mystery that connects ancient times and modern research. It reminds us that even seemingly simple structures can conceal profound meaning. And while nature and time continue to surround the stones with their silence, this mystery remains alive, evoking admiration and many questions. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are one of the most silent yet astonishing mysteries. These perfectly rounded boulders are scattered throughout jungles, hills, and plains. Some stand alone, others form groups. They are found near ancient settlements, in former plazas, and even on hillsides. At first glance, they appear to be part of the natural landscape, but they are the work of human hands. The size of the balls is astounding. The smallest ones can be lifted by hand. They resemble large watermelons. The largest ones reach several meters and weigh tens of tons. Yet, almost all of them are remarkably smooth. If you walk around a ball, you get the impression it was made using an invisible template, allowing the craftsman to achieve its perfect shape. The balls are made of hard rock. Working it requires prolonged blows, heating, cooling, and special skill. How exactly the ancient craftsmen achieved such precision is unclear. Some balls show signs of being worked with fire, indicating that the stone was heated and then struck with stone hammers. This method is known, but it usually does not produce a perfect shape. Scientists speculate that the craftsmen used a combination of methods. They may have heated the stone, then cooled it with water, creating microcracks. They then smoothed the surface, repeating the process over and over again. But even so, such precision requires a tremendous amount of time and expertise. The mystery lies not only in the shape of the spheres, but also in their purpose. Why did ancient peoples need to create hundreds of perfect stone spheres? There is no definitive answer to this question. It is known that the spheres were made by representatives of one local culture that lived long before the first Latin sources appeared. They built houses, created decorated platforms, and produced ceramics. But the spheres clearly held a special place in their lives. One theory is linked to power. The balls were perhaps placed near rulers' homes or on sacred sites. Their size could indicate wealth or status. Particularly large and smooth specimens are found near large settlements. This may indicate that creating the balls was a prestigious endeavor. There's a theory about their spiritual significance. The balls could have symbolized celestial bodies. The sky was of great importance to ancient people. They observed the movements of the sun, moon, and bright stars. Perhaps the stone balls were a way to convey these observations, or served as part of rituals associated with the seasons. Another idea suggests that the balls may have been planning elements. Some of them are arranged in lines that may coincide with the directions of sunrise or sunset on certain days. If so, the balls served as an ancient orientation system. However, due to the enormous amount of ground movement over the centuries, this is difficult to prove. How the largest spheres were transported also remains a mystery. The sites where they are found are often far from the stone's sources. This means that people transported the enormous boulders without wheels or metal tools. They may have used logs, ropes, and teams of workers to drag the structures along the ground. In the 20th century, many of the spheres were damaged. People believed the legend that treasures might be inside. They blasted the stones, trying to find the jewels. But the spheres turned out to be empty. This only deepened the mystery. Why create such enormous objects without leaving any signs or objects inside? Today, Costa Rican marbles have become a symbol of the country. They are recognized as a human heritage. But despite this, their history still holds many unknowns. We know who created them, but we don't know why. We understand that they require a tremendous amount of labor, but we don't know all the techniques the artisans used. This mystery remains an example of how even small and simple forms can hold profound meaning. The stone spheres remind us that ancient cultures were capable of creating not only temples and cities, but also symbols whose meaning has been lost to time. And as we continue to study these wondrous spheres, they remain silent witnesses to the fact that human ingenuity can be far more complex than it seems. Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is one of the most enigmatic discoveries of antiquity. This device was discovered over 120 years ago near a Greek island on a sunken ship. It was covered in corrosion and looked like a shapeless lump of metal. But when scientists were able to examine its interior, they discovered something incredible. Inside, a complex system of gears was discovered. For the era in which it was created, such technology would have seemed impossible. Imagine a device capable of displaying the movements of celestial bodies, the phases of the moon, and solar cycles, crafted by skilled craftsmen without machines, without steel, only with bronze and the simplest tools. Researchers believe the mechanism served as an ancient astronomical aid. It allowed for advanced prediction of important celestial events. Such information was of great importance to ancient people, linked to the calculation of agricultural seasons, sea voyages, and religious rituals. The most astonishing thing about the device is its precision. The gears have fine teeth, arranged with such precision that their creation required incredible skill. Craftsmen of that era could work with metal, but such precision is extremely rare and completely atypical. It has been suggested that the mechanism's creator was a talented scientist possessing knowledge that was only accessible to a select few at the time. It may have been a device created for the school of some astronomer. Some researchers believe that followers of the great ancient Greek scientists may have been involved in its creation. However, many questions remain about the device. The find is unique. Nothing similar has been found elsewhere. This raises questions. If such mechanisms existed, why has only one survived? Could it be that such devices were rare and only available to influential people? Another mystery is how exactly the craftsman calculated the gear ratios. Such work requires knowledge of celestial cycles. Some of these cycles repeat every many years, and their precise calculation requires long-term observation. Where did the mechanism's creators get this data? Modern research efforts, including three-dimensional reconstructions, have significantly advanced our understanding of the device. However, because the mechanism is over 2,000 years old, many of its components have deteriorated. The text on its surface is only partially preserved, preventing a full reconstruction of its functions. There are also those who see the mechanism as more than just a device. It has become a symbol of how we can underestimate ancient civilizations. Technology often seems to advance gradually, but the Antikythera mechanism exemplifies an unexpected breakthrough that could later be lost. Why such knowledge never spread remains a mystery. Perhaps the device was an experiment. Perhaps its creators perished at sea and the tradition of craftsmanship was broken. Perhaps there were more similar devices, but they did not survive the ravages of time. Whatever its origin, the Antikythera mechanism remains a reminder that history doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes brilliant ideas emerge unexpectedly and then vanish, leaving only hints for future generations. And until we unravel the full secrets of its gears, this astonishing discovery will continue to captivate the imagination and raise questions that remain unanswered. Construction of the Pyramids of Giza. The Pyramids of Giza seem so familiar in pictures that it's easy to forget just how strange they are. These enormous stone mountains, built by people without modern technology, still raise questions. No scientist can fully explain how exactly they were built. The most famous of these is the so-called Great Pyramid. It consists of millions of stone blocks, each weighing several tons. Imagine the task: cutting such a stone, transporting it from the quarry, lifting it to a height, and laying it down with virtually no gaps, all without cranes, motors, or steel. There's a theory that the main tool wasn't the power of miracles, but organization. The Egyptians had a powerful state, a rigid system of governance, and could attract tens of thousands of people. These weren't slaves in chains, but mostly peasants, working on construction projects during the flood season of the Great River when the fields were flooded. Stones were cut in quarries using copper tools, stone hammers, and wooden wedges. To separate a block, the wedges were driven into cracks and then filled with water. The wood swelled, the crack widened, and the stone broke along the desired line. The process was slow but justified by the enormous labor force. The transport of blocks is a mystery in itself. Drawings have been found on the walls of ancient tombs depicting people pulling a huge statue on a sled, while a person in front pours water on the sand. Modern experiments have shown that wet sand does indeed reduce friction, making it easier to drag heavy loads. This could have been how stones were transported overland. It's believed that water was also used. Some researchers believe that canals led to the plateau through which barges laden with stone were carried closer to the construction site. This shortened the overland journey. Direct evidence is scarce, but the idea itself is logical. Water has been the primary means of transporting heavy loads for millennia. The main mystery is how the stones were raised ever higher. The most popular theory suggests long earthen ramps. They were used to haul the blocks to the next level of the pyramid. The ramps could be straight, extending from one side, or spiraling, encircling the structure under construction. The downside is that such ramps also required a colossal amount of labor and materials. There are also more unusual ideas. For example, an internal spiral ramp hidden within the pyramid's body. It's barely visible from the outside, but inside it could have served as a path for stones. Certain masonry features and strange voids in the structure seem to support this theory, but there's no definitive proof. The precision adds to the mystery. The pyramid's sides are aligned almost exactly with the cardinal directions. The base is leveled with incredible precision. How the ancient craftsmen achieved such precision without modern instruments remains a mystery. It is believed they used shadows, stargazing, and simple yet ingenious measuring techniques. Finally, the human factor is important. For a construction project of this scale to be possible, the Egyptians must have not only possessed the necessary machinery, but also organized food, housing, and security for the enormous army of builders. Archaeologists have found the remains of a workers' settlement. It included bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities. It was a vast construction site city. And yet, even with all this knowledge, we still can't reconstruct every step of the construction in detail. The exact ramp scheme used, how people were assigned to tasks, how many years each stage took, all of this remains a subject of debate. It's this combination of partial knowledge and uncertainty that makes the Giza pyramids one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Yonaguni Underwater Ruins. The underwater ruins of Yonaguni are one of the most mysterious discoveries made in the waters off the coast of Japan. On the seabed lie gigantic stone formations resembling stairs, terraces, walls, and level platforms. When divers first saw these structures, they were astonished. They look not like natural formations, but like the remains of an ancient city that had vanished underwater. The complex's main feature is its geometry. Many surfaces have sharp angles, smooth lines, and steps. Some sections resemble wide staircases leading upward. Others resemble squares or building foundations. These shapes are difficult to explain by the random erosion of rock, but proving their artificial origin is also currently impossible. One theory suggests that these structures may have been created by humans in ancient times, when sea levels were significantly lower. The sea rose gradually, especially after the end of the last ice age. If structures once stood here, they could have been submerged. But for this theory to be valid, it would require the assumption that a sophisticated culture capable of carving enormous stone forms once existed on the island. Proponents of an artificial origin offer numerous arguments. They note that many of the stairways have uniform step heights. Some platforms resemble cultivated areas. In some areas, the surfaces are so smooth that they appear to have been smoothed with tools. Furthermore, nearby are isolated stone formations resembling columns or wall fragments. But this theory has its difficulties. Evidence of such an ancient culture has not yet been found. There are no traces of cities built in a similar manner on the nearby islands. Archaeologists have found no tools, dwellings, or other objects that would indicate a people capable of large-scale stonework. This raises the question of whether the structure's form is truly human-like. Another group of researchers believes that Yonaguni structures are natural. The region is home to rocks that tend to split into smooth layers. Seawater, currents, and earthquakes could have eroded the layers, forming geometric shapes. Such processes sometimes create smooth steps and flat surfaces. If not for the sheer scale of the structures, this theory would seem simple, but the sheer size is simply too impressive. Some platforms are over tens of meters long. The stairs are so wide that entire rows of people could climb them. This leads many to doubt that nature could have created such a combination of forms. There's a middle ground among researchers. It suggests that the complex's foundation is natural. However, ancient inhabitants could have expanded, trimmed, and refined the natural forms. People sometimes use natural protrusions as a base, shaping them into the desired shapes. This mixed origin could have created the impression of ruins. Traces of ancient cultures exist on the island's surface, but they date back to later periods. Tombs, stone structures, and ritual objects have been found there. However, they are not directly related to the underwater ruins. Therefore, the connection of these structures to known local cultures remains questionable. The Yonaguni mystery is further deepened by the precise orientation of some structures. Some sections are aligned in directions reminiscent of sunrise and sunset. This has led some researchers to speculate about the complex's possible astronomical significance. However, definitive proof is difficult, as underwater erosion could have altered some of the alignments. It's important to note that dives to the ruins are conducted regularly. Divers report a unique atmosphere at depth. It feels as if you're walking through an ancient palace or a vast plaza. However, water and time have smoothed out many details, leaving only the larger forms. This creates the impression that the ruins are reluctant to reveal their full history. Research continues over time. Scientists analyze the rock structure, examine possible signs of processing, and compare the shapes with other natural formations. New data emerges every year, but a definitive answer remains elusive. The underwater ruins of Yonaguni remain an example of how nature and human perception sometimes collide. Some see them as an ancient city, others as a unique natural phenomenon. Perhaps one day, new research methods will emerge that will allow us to accurately determine the origin of these enigmatic forms. Until then, Yonaguni remains one of the most beautiful and captivating mysteries. It holds traces of the past, which could belong to people, nature, or a combination of both. And while the waves continue to conceal the stone steps beneath the water, This mystery remains alive, confusing traces and beckoning explorers ever deeper. The world is full of mysteries that continue to surprise, even in the age of technology. From ancient structures to unexplained natural phenomena, each enigma reminds us that humanity still doesn't understand everything about our planet. We study, research, and theorize, but many questions remain unanswered. And perhaps this is precisely what makes our history come alive. Mysteries motivate us to seek answers, to move forward, to look deeper and broader. As long as mysteries remain on Earth, we will always have a source of wonder, inspiration, and new discoveries.